Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Second Chance by MaskedPyro. What would you do if you died and were given a second chance to live? What if coming back meant you return as a child, and you and the people most important to you lost all their memories along with their age? Find out what Ace, Sabo, and Luffy end up going through just to be with each other. Adios.
It had been a week since the brothers left Sunny, leaving no evidence as to where they were going. Everyone was worried, whether they said it or not. It had gotten to the point where even Zoro and Sanji couldn't fight each other. Nothing was right without their captain there, whether he was a child again or not. Most of the Straw Hats had just spaced out on multiple occasions, sometimes for an hour or more. It was one of those moments. The crew had been laying on deck, all of them spaced out and in their own world. Just then an echo of "Purupurupuru" had made itself heard on deck, startling the crew. At the sudden sound, the crew had jumped, either scared or ready to fight. That's when they realized what the sound was. Slowly, the crew made their way to the source of the sound in the dining hall. The sound echoed almost too loudly on the quiet ship and in the well-sized room. Purupurupuru purupurupuru purupurupu cha. The den den mushi sounded as the call was answered. "Hello?" Zoro answered. "Hello. This is the ship of the Straw Hat Pirates, correct? Or might I be mistaken?" An almost gentle and noble voice asked. His final statement said with a slight chuckle. "Depends. Who's calling?" Zoro replied. "My apologies, but I'd rather not say who unless I may speak to your captain." "May I speak to Luffy?" the man asked kindly. "He isn't here," Zoro said. "Haven't you heard? He disappeared." "That can't be right. My informant told me to call you. She said there was something you might like to see as well as I might. You know what it is?" the man asked, sounding more like a noble by the second. Zoro was silent. He had no idea what the man was talking about. Then there came the question, why did the man sound so happy when mentioning Luffy? And what does this man, who sounds like a high-ranked noble, know Luffy? And another question, how did the man get their number? It wasn't like they were running around islands screaming, "This is our number, gives us a call someday?" To the whole goddamn world. Very few, if any, people knew the number. While Zoro was silently asking questions, Nami had decided to voice them. "How do you know Luffy? And why do you sound like a noble?" Everyone could hear a slight gasp coming from the other end, followed by a sigh and a small muttering that sounded something akin to, "I guess their speech did rub off on me after all." After a moment of silence, the man replied, "I suppose the fact that Luffy hasn't stolen the phone or is yelling excitedly in the background would mean he's either asleep or he truly is missing. Although I'm not surprised if he is sleeping. The only thing that wakes him up is the mention of food." There was a pause, almost as if the speaker were waiting for something. So it's true. Do you have any ideas where he might have gone?" "He ran away with his brothers a week ago. We have no idea where he is," Nami stated sadly. "Excuse me, but did you say, brothers?" the man asked in disbelief. "Yes," Nami stated cautiously. "Why do you ask, please? This joke has gone far enough. Tell me where he is," the man said, almost as if he were about to panic. "We aren't joking. Luffy and his two older brothers ran away on one of our boats a week ago," Nami stated. "You're wrong," the man shouted in panic. "Luffy only has two brothers and one of them died mere weeks ago at Marineford. Explain to me how he could have run away with a dead brother and a brother he claims to have died 10 years ago." "What do you mean by claims?" Robin asked calmly. There was a few moments of silence before the voice returned. "At least tell me what their names were. Maybe even a brief description of them," the man nearly begged. "Ace and Sabo. Both were 10. Ace had raven hair and freckles covering his cheeks and nose. Sabo was blonde with a missing tooth and dressed in a top hat with goggles and a blue tail coat," the man finished for Robin. "Correct. How might you have known?" Robin questioned. The man sighed. "Why the hell does trouble always have to follow him? He's definitely his father's son," he said, avoiding Robin's question. "Who are you?" Sanji nearly growled. "If I find out you want to hurt them, then I'll personally kill you myself." Now why would I want to do that? I know what they look like because I was there when Ace and Sabo were young. The man stated, sounding almost as if it were strange to say Sabo's name. And you remember it? Usopp muttered in the background. Doesn't that seem kinda, oh I don't know, stalker-ish? Photographic memory. Can't help but remember it. Especially when he wore the same outfit for a few months at least. The man informed, apparently having heard Usopp's comment. You seem to know them the best. Where do you think they would go? Robin asked. They wouldn't allow Luffy to be in charge. He can't navigate and the two older boys would never let him be in charge. Ace wasn't the best at navigation either. Sabo, he wasn't the worst but neither the best. They would most likely have followed the sun or moon if it was night. The man said, still sounding as if he was forcing himself to say, Sabo. That doesn't help. Nami shouted. Saikai no Shima, the man said plainly. What? Chopper asked. Saikai no Shima, the man repeated. Doesn't that mean, Island of Reunion? Brook asked. Indeed. That is also where they are headed. No need to worry for them either. They're with the Whitebeard pirates. The man sighed. Now I know what Koala had refused to tell me. This is very strange, although I must say, I wouldn't mind questioning little Sabo. What are you talking about? Why do you want to question Sabo? Nami asked. If my presumptions are correct, then Ace was somehow revived and turned into a child, along with Luffy most likely. The odd man out would be Sabo, the man informed. How so? Robin asked. Because of something quite simple, he didn't die, so he couldn't have been revived as a child. If using Luffy's case of simply reversing in age, then it is impossible as well, the man stated. You're losing me bro. Frankie stated. Same here. Usopp, Chopper, and Brook said in unison. How would that be impossible? Sanji questioned. Because I am 20 years old. The man said as if it was the simplest thing in the world. What does that have to do with any of this? Zoro nearly yelled. Because Luffy is my little brother and Ace my older. I am Sabo. The man, Sabo, stated. There was a heavy silence in the room as everyone tried to take in what Sabo said. What? They all shouted. Sabo sighed. Of course Luffy would get a crew like this. Sabo-san. Would you mind explaining what you believe is happening? Robin asked calmly. I'd love to, except I have no idea. Give me some time and I shall inform you of what I find. Until we meet on Saikai no Shima. Sabo said before hanging up. Don't just hang up like that, everyone shouted angrily. Robin choosing to stay calm and instead giggle at the crew's reaction. XXX Thatch woke up the next day with something heavy laying on him. He attempted to open his eyes and see what it was, but instead was blinded by the bright lights reflecting off the pure white walls. After a few attempts, his eyes adjusted and he could see what was on him. Quickly he noticed it wasn't a something but instead it was a someone. That someone turned out to be 3 small boys spread out on his chest and arms. Luffy had been the one laying on his chest, fast asleep. Ace and Sabo had their heads on his shoulders and were almost hugging his arms like they were teddy bears. Soon after, he noticed Haruta had been using his own arms as a pillow as they laid crossed on the bed. Directly across from Haruta was Vista, in the same position. All of them asleep. They refused to move, Yoi. Marco informed, making his presence known. Thatch turned his head towards Marco and saw him sitting on one of the chairs with the newspaper in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. It's all right. I'm just glad Luffy is lighter than I first thought. Thatch whispered, Careboy are his brothers. You should know, the nurses came in earlier and were taking pictures, Yoi. Marco stated, still looking at the paper. So that's what the annoying clicking was, Thatch muttered to himself. Oh well. Can't really do anything about it now, right? I would believe so, Yoi. Marco said before taking a sip of coffee. What time is it? Thatch asked. 9 o'clock. Marco stated. You're really chatty this morning, aren't you? Thatch commented, sarcasm practically dripping off each word. I'm trying not to wake them, Yoi. Marco said, slightly nodding his head towards the boys that were currently using Thatch as a pillow, or bed in Luffy's case. With that, Thatch looked back at the boys. Just as he looked, he saw Luffy ball up like a small kitten and gently grab his shirt like a baby with their blanket. Thatch had to fight back the small squeal that tried to escape. He knew it sounded strange, but the small boy was just too cute. Quickly, Thatch noticed something wrap around his arms. As soon as he looked, he saw the two older brothers had grabbed his arms and were hugging them. They looked so innocent. Thatch almost had a hard time remembering how dangerous these boys were. Almost being the key word. He easily remembered how strong Ace was and how much trouble Luffy had gotten into when he was older. He then remembered hearing how strong Sabo was. Thatch quickly paled at the thought of 3 monsters sleeping on him. He was officially terrified for his life. He felt like, if he woke one up, even in the slightest, then all hell would break loose and he would be the first to die. Immediately he felt a small wave of comfort wash over him when he remembered he was still in the infirmary. "Are you alright, Yoi? You're really pale," Marco commented. "Why yeah," Thatch replied before looking at the boys with a worried look and sighing after seeing they were still out cold. "Don't tell me you're afraid of some kids, Yoi," Marco teased. "It's Ace and Luffy, plus a kid that's almost as strong as Ace. I'd be crazy if I wasn't scared," Thatch whispered. "Ace doesn't have his devil fruit. Luffy can't control his well enough to be of harm. And they're only that strong when they have weapons, which are in their room, Yoi," Marco explained. "Shut up," Thatch muttered. "What's with all the talking?" Haruta muttered as he awoke. "Sorry," Thatch whispered. "Our 4th Division commander is afraid of kids, Yoi," Marco stated. "That's just sad. Wait, those 3 are kids in general?" Haruta asked. "These 3? Thatch whispered as he eyed said boys. "I take it back. You're a smart man," Haruta said. Marco sighed. "Of all things, why are you afraid of 3 children, Yoi?" "They aren't just children, Marco. They're monsters. They're scary strong. I was sparring with Sabo the other day and I would have lost if Luffy hadn't run out being chased by Ace," Haruta whispered, remembering the moment perfectly. "You do realize how weak that makes you sound, correct, Yoi?" Marco asked, taking another sip of coffee. "Shut up," Haruta muttered. There were a few moments of silence. The only sounds coming from either Marco, as he either sipped coffee or turned a page, or the 3 boys who were quietly snoring. Vista laying there soundlessly. After a minute or two of not hearing anything from the man, nor seeing him move slightly due to his chest raising and falling from breathing, Thatch and Haruta started worrying. Soon enough, Haruta had walked over to Vista and started poking him. When he rolled his shoulder to make the other stop, Haruta and Thatch let out a breath they hadn't known they were holding. Shortly after, Vista had woken up. After seeing Marco had finished his coffee, Vista decided to grab a mug for himself and refill the captain's at the same time. Quietly he opened the door, walked through, and closed it, leaving the room. After a few short moments, Thatch, Haruta, and Marco started to hear some light groans. After a few seconds, they realized the sounds were coming from Ace. As they watched the boy for a few more moments, they noticed him flinch and tighten his grip on Thatch's arm. Thatch had to bite his lip to prevent himself from making any noise. The kid was strong, even in his sleep. "Oyaji," Ace murmured in his sleep. Immediately, Marco, Haruta, and Thatch had wide eyes and were staring at Ace. At first they thought they were just hearing things, but then Ace had said it again, this time slightly louder. Soon enough, the commanders were worried. Had the boy remembered? "I'm sorry, Oyaji, everyone," Ace muttered, a small tear rolling down his face and onto Thatch's arm. "Ace," Thatch whispered. "Thank you," Ace began. As if knowing what he was going to say, Luffy had moved and hit Ace just hard enough for him to stop speaking. Soon they saw a small smile on Ace's face along with a few more tears streaming. Then they noticed Luffy, who was laying on Thatch still, but was now holding the cloth in his hand tighter, along with having tears streaming down his face and onto the man. Luffy was crying more than Ace and had been searching for comfort from Thatch. Thatch wanted nothing more than to hug the boy and get him out of whatever dream that was causing him to react this way, but he couldn't. Ace had been holding his left arm too tightly to where he could just barely feel his hand, while Sabo was also holding his opposite arm, but not as tightly. He wanted to tell the boy to wake up, but that would have woken up the other 2. Help the youngest and risk being murdered by the older 2, or leave the boy in his nightmare. The choice was easier than he expected. "Oi, Luffy. I need you to wake up now," Thatch called out. Instead of waking up, Luffy readjusted so that he was almost completely face down. His head was on its side, facing Ace, and resting over Thatch's heart. Slowly, the boy's face changed from a deep frown to a small smile. Thatch smiled as well. At least the boy wasn't crying anymore. About 30 minutes later, the boys started waking up. First Sabo, followed by Ace. At first Ace had been reluctant until he realized where he was, what he was hugging, and who it was attached to. Ace still had a small blush of embarrassment on his freckled cheeks as he moved to wake Luffy. As soon as he saw the small smile on the boy's face, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead he just pet the boy's head, causing the small smile to grow slightly. As Ace started to pull his hand away, Luffy started to lean closer to Ace. Once Ace noticed this, he smiled slightly before grabbing the boy off the commander's chest and setting Luffy down in his lap. Quickly, Luffy had wrapped his arms around Ace and vice versa. Ace seemed to be in another world as he stared at his little brother's face with a small smile of his own. "Never thought I'd say this, but sometimes I miss these moments," Ace muttered. "What moments?" Thatch whispered as he slowly sat up. "Moments where he's just so out of it that he's actually calm," Ace commented. It was quiet for a few moments as Ace gently rocked the boy in his arms. Everyone in the room knew Ace would deny this ever happened. They didn't want to ruin it for the boys. Slowly, Ace's small smile grew into a fond one, as if remembering something. Soon enough though, the smile left and turned into a straight face. "Ace," Haruta whispered. Ace gently shook his head. "Just remembering the last time we did this, right after Luffy had been picked on by some noble brats. They started to attack him and he wouldn't fight back. When they pulled out knives was when I finally stepped in and beat them up. We went back to our cliff and sat like this, watching the stars. Then they started moving and we realized at least half of them were fireflies. They were so beautiful," Ace said, his smile returning. "Then I started asking why they were called fireflies when they weren't on fire. We spent way too long talking about that." Luffy added with a small smile of his own, letting everyone know he was awake. "Yeah, I aimed that when I was trying to think of new moves. That would definitely explain Hotarubi Hidoruma," Ace said with a small chuckle. What did you just say?" Marco stuttered. Ace lifted his head to look at Marco and nearly burst out laughing. "What's with the face, Marco? I've never seen your eyes so wide, it's honestly a little scary." "Hey Ace," Thatch muttered. Ace looked at Thatch before grinning and nodding slightly. "Gotta go. See ya guys soon," Ace said before he looked at Luffy with a smile and closed his eyes. Wait. Hey Ace," Haruta called out as he grabbed the boy's shoulder. Ace's eyes shot open and looked at Haruta. The eyes he once knew fading back to the childish ones that had been there for the past week. Slowly he took his hand off the boy's shoulder and sat down in one of the chairs next to him. "Ace, why are you hugging me?" Luffy asked innocently. Quickly Ace looked down and saw he was, in fact, still holding the child. Soon enough, Luffy was on the bed with Ace's back to him. Ace trying to get rid of the blush of embarrassment on his face, not looking at anyone. As soon as Ace was looking away, Marco and Thatch looked at each other, holding a silent conversation with their eyes. First Luffy, now Ace. Just what was going on? XXX Koala looked out at the ocean. Even though she saw it every day, she still loved to stare at it. But this reason was different. In the distance, she could see the dark outline of an island. She knew which it was too. Saikai no Shima. "Land ho!" The man in the crow's nest shouted. Koala's smile widened. This was going to be very interesting. The Straw Hats stood there in silence. After the man said his name and hung up, they didn't know what to think or say. One thing was obvious though, they were all confused. The Sabo they knew was a 10-year-old with Ace and Luffy, and yet this man, who said he was 20, said he was Sabo. He was lying, right? Chopper stuttered, breaking the silence. "I would believe so," Robin said quietly. "But how did he know about Sabo?" "Neither Ace nor Luffy mentioned him, so how did a stranger know about the kid?" Nami questioned. "He said he was there when they were young. Maybe that part was the truth," Brook stated. "He sounded like he knew a lot about them, so it has to be true," Sanji commented. "But wouldn't he have been 10 years old as well back then? How did he remember?" Usopp asked. "Photographic memory. It was his reasoning, at least," Robin reminded. "But why didn't Luffy tell us anything about his brothers? I mean, if we didn't meet Ace then we wouldn't have known Luffy had a brother," Chopper asked. "Do you want to share every bit of your past? Do you want to be reminded of every horrible moment including your brother's death?" Zoro questioned. Chopper immediately understood and put his head down sadly. He had lost someone and didn't want to remember the monk's death. It was too sad and he didn't want to talk about it. But I'm curious. The boys aren't related, so how are they brothers? Usopp asked. Adoption, most likely. Nami said bluntly. Stop asking stupid questions, Usopp, Sanji said. Sorry, Usopp apologized. He said the bros were headed to Saikai no Shima. Should we go? It might be a trap, Frankie asked. It's the best lead we've got. We have to go. Everyone ready the ship. We're headed to Saikai no Shima, Zoro ordered. Everyone nodded and immediately ran out of the room to do their parts. XXX. After hearing the shout of a new island, Vista smiled and headed back to the infirmary with the 2 cups of freshly brewed coffee. Quietly, he opened the door and saw everyone was awake. Marco, Thatch, Haruta, and Sabo all looked shocked. Luffy was pouting at Ace while he had his back to the younger, trying to hide a small blush. What did I miss? Vista asked, breaking the silence. Where have you been? Thatch shouted. I had to make a fresh batch of coffee, Vista replied. It does not take more than 30 minutes to do so, Yoi, Marco said before he took his mug from Vista and drank half of it instantly. A lot of people wanted coffee, more than usual, Vista explained. Thatch sighed and looked at the group around him, eyes stopping on Haruta. Oi, Haruta. Wake up, Thatch said, waving his hand in front of the other commander's face. Huh? Haruta sounded. Don't space out like that, it's freaky, Thatch said. Whatever. Haruta muttered. On a different note, we've spotted land, Vista said with a smile. Really? Ace, Sabo, and Luffy shouted in excitement. Yes. We should be docking within the hour, Vista informed. Awesome. Luffy shouted before chanting the word, adventure, repeatedly. Luffy, calm down. Remember where you are. Sabo commanded, reminding the boy that they were still in the infirmary. Oh, sorry. Luffy whispered. Good, Sabo said with a smile. Oh, Ace, what do you think the island is gonna be like? Do you think it'll have a big forest like at home? Or maybe like the last island? I hope it's like home. I wanna run around, but I also wanna meet more people. Luffy rambled loudly, already forgetting what Sabo said. Don't know. I wouldn't mind some hunting though, Ace said. Yeah, I'm feeling kinda rusty, Sabo said with a smirk. We need to train more often now that I think about it, Ace muttered. He haven't been sparring a lot recently. Oh yeah. Sabo mumbled. We'll check out the island, spar a bit if it has a forest, explore a bit, and then come back and spar here if we can't there, Luffy said. Everyone looked to Luffy with wide eyes. Their first thought, Luffy having had another fit, was pushed aside when they realized his eyes were still childish ones instead of the hard and mature they were worried or scared of. What did you say, Yoi? Marco asked, still not believing the younger boy was saying this. Go to island. Spar if forest. Explore. Spar here if no forest. Luffy said as if speaking to a baby. Luffy? Are you alright? Did you finally learn how to think? Ace asked slowly. I don't know. Did I? Luffy asked, confused. He's fine, Sabo said with a sweat drop. Everyone in the room, excluding Luffy and Sabo, all nodded while sweat dropping. An hour later, everyone was on deck and helping with docking the ship, except the brothers and Thatch. When the island had come into view, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy all started getting excited. The island looked a lot like what they had agreed would be the perfect place for them to visit. 1/3 forest, 1/3 mountain, and 1/3 plains. Although, the plains were mostly covered by a large city. When they had caught a glimpse at a giant boar at the edge of the forest, the boys were even happier. When they had finished docking, the boys had nearly jumped off and headed to the forest. Or so they would have if Thatch, Marco, and Vista hadn't grabbed them first. Ace was angry that they couldn't leave yet and started his attempt at attacking the man holding him, which turned out to be Marco. Sabo tried to stay calm but failed badly and started yelling at Vista to let him go. Luffy was the only one who stayed quiet and chose to just watch his brothers argue with the men. Thatch. You can put me down. I won't run. Luffy whispered, loud enough for only the man holding him to hear. Promise? Thatch questioned quietly. Luffy nodded. I don't want to hurt you more. What do you mean? Thatch asked. Your back still hurts, right? And I'm sure I'm heavy. I don't want my friends to be in pain because of me. Luffy explained. You're a good kid, Luffy. Thatch whispered as he put the boy down, making sure to hold Luffy's hand in case the boy tried to make a run for it. Luffy and Thatch watched quietly as Ace and Sabo kept yelling at Marco and Vista to let go of them. Eventually the boys started using their pipes as weapons against the men holding them. Neither of the boys looked like they would be winning anytime soon. After some time, Luffy got bored of watching his brothers arguing and instead focused on the sweet scent that filled his senses. Hey Thatch? Luffy asked, looking up at said man. Yeah? Thatch asked, looking at Luffy. I smell cookies, can we go get some? Luffy asked. Sure. Lead the way, little buddy, Thatch said with a smile. Luffy smiled and, much to Thatch's surprise, walked slowly off the ship. Thatch had been expecting the boy to sprint away and force Thatch to run after him. But then he remembered what Luffy said. Had his injury really affected the boy this much? After some time, Luffy and Thatch had made it to the small bakery in the city. The woman that owned the shop had been kind enough to let Luffy try one of her fresh-baked cookies for free. Luffy thanked the woman before breaking the cookie in two and giving half to Thatch. Both of the boys were amazed at the taste and had asked for more. In the end, they got 2 boxes of cookies for only half the price. After they got their treats, Luffy and Thatch decided to look around the city. Thatch had stopped at a few shops to pick up either the finest ingredients or a few additions to his arsenal of cooking supplies. Luffy didn't mind stopping. In his mind, the better the ingredients and utensils, the better the food. Soon though, they had to return to the ship and drop off what they got. It wasn't much, but Luffy didn't allow Thatch to carry too much and Luffy was unable to carry a lot due to his size. When they returned to the Moby, they saw Ace and Sabo finally on their feet, but still fuming about what happened. When Thatch and Luffy returned to the deck, they saw Ace, Sabo, and Marco waiting for them. Quickly, the group of 5 left the ship and went looking around the rest of the hour of random shopping. The smell of fresh bread was in the air. They followed the smell and found the same baker as before. Luffy and Thatch smiled at this while the other 3 looked confused. When they entered the shop, the woman smiled to them and welcomed them again. While talking with the baker, everyone had gotten some free samples of breads, cookies, brownies, cakes, or donuts. The samples were small but still held an amazing amount of flavor. After Ace and Sabo started saying how great everything was, the woman giggled. It took a few minutes, but eventually Ace and Sabo made up their minds as to what they each wanted most. After taking their orders and giving the group what they wanted, the woman gave them most of their orders for free. Thatch and Marco were shocked by this. They felt as if they had just stolen all of this woman's goods. When the 2 grown men asked if it was alright to pay so little for so much, the woman told them she was fine with it. All because she liked the boys so much. In return, Marco gave the woman a large tip since she wouldn't take any money otherwise. The baker was shocked by the amount, even saying it was enough to pay for her house and shop for a few months. Marco just smiled and told her there would most likely be more of the crew there later. She thanked him for the service before the group left. Soon enough, they were back at the ship with another load of baked goods. When some of the crew asked them about why there were so many boxes from a bakery, Marco just told them the address to the bakery and to say they knew each other. After looking at the captain curiously, the crew shrugged it off and went where Marco had said. After some time, the boxes of baked goods were put away. Ace and Sabo had written their names on their boxes so nobody else would take their goods. Luffy couldn't help but laugh at how possessive his brothers were being when it came to donut holes and mini brownies. After eating a proper, non-sweets-based lunch, the group went back out to look around the island. Their main goal was to find a good place for the boys to spar. Instead, they were caught up with fighting the large animals that inhabited the forest. When the 3 boys saw the actual size of the boars, they were pretty upset. The animals were big, but not as big as back home. After an hour of fighting nothing but small fry that even Luffy could knock out, they had started to lose hope for the island's animal population. That is, until they finally found what the boys had been hoping for. In the middle of a clearing was a massive boar, nearly the size of the famed Tiger Lord back home. Once they saw its size, the boys started getting excited. Marco and Thatch looked on in worry as they saw the boys run at the massive beast. After a few minutes though, the men were surprised. The three boys had taken down the massive boar that was at least 10 times their size. Quickly the boys stopped their celebrating when they heard a familiar sound. A large river was nearby. Immediately, the boys ran to the river and found a good amount of crocodiles. After some searching, the three of them found which ones they each thought was the largest. There were 3 that tied. After a few moments, all the smaller crocs were out cold. All that was left were the 3 biggest. Each of the boys took the one they thought was larger. Within a minute, the 3 largest were laid side by side on the shore. It took a little while, but in the end, they found out the only difference between the 3 was about an inch or 2. Surprisingly, Luffy's had been the largest. Very soon, Marco and Thatch came out of the bushes with the giant boar in tow. When the men saw all the dead or unconscious crocs, they were amazed. Then they saw the boys standing next to the 3 biggest crocs. After a few moments, they saw Luffy celebrating while Ace looked angry and Sabo was laughing at how he had gotten the smallest. The 2 men were impressed, to say the least. When they realized how close it was to sunset, they decided to head back. The 3 boys each grabbed their own crocodile and started to drag the beasts towards the ship. Marco still dragging the boar. They couldn't help but think about how lucky they were to find another trail that led to the ship while avoiding the city. None of them wanted to explain how 3 small boys had caught such large animals. When they got back to the ship, they couldn't help but laugh. Everyone on deck had their jaws on the floor at the sight of the beasts. The second reason for the small group to laughing being the fact that most of the people on deck had a small bag from the bakery they visited earlier. Once they had put the beasts in a safe place, where it would wait to be cooked, they returned to the deck. Ace and Sabo immediately noticed 2 of the crew members holding their small boxes of goods. Instantly, the 2 pirates were attacked by the boys for stealing their food. Everyone was laughing but also felt sorry for the 2 men. But they should have known better. Once the 2 men were unconscious, and most likely would be for the next few hours, Ace and Sabo found that not even a crumb was left in their boxes. Quickly, Luffy told them about the cookies he and Thatch had bought. The 3 boys ran to the kitchen as fast as possible, hoping the treats would still be there. Sadly, when they arrived, they found 2 empty boxes of what used to hold cookies. Instantly, the 3 brothers were back on deck in front of Thatch and Marco. The boys asked if they could go back to the bakery and buy some padlocks while on the way, accidentally reminding Thatch of his personal note of adding locks to the boys' door. Without hesitation, Thatch agreed and took the boys back to the bakery while Marco scolded the crew. The baker immediately bowed to Thatch and the boys as they entered and gave them replacements to their stolen goods. The woman said everything was free because, in total, the crew might as well have paid for her house and shop for the next 10 years. They were all grateful to each other, the boys and Thatch for the goods and the woman for the money and business. On the way back to the ship, Ace and Sabo had been eating their goods so the food wouldn't get stolen again. A few blocks away from the bakery was a hardware shop. When they entered the shop, the first thing they saw was the vast array of tools which seemed like far more than what was necessary. Soon they found the shop owner and asked about padlocks. In the end, they walked out with a padlock for Ace and Luffy's trunks, 3 for their door, a few for some of the cabinets, and 1 for the fridge, a total of at least 6 locks. After saying how many they needed, the shop owner had given them 3 for free. Thatch couldn't help but think about how generous the people of this city were. When they got back to the ship, Ace and Sabo's boxes of goods were empty and both were smiling. When the 2 boys heard that the 2 men they beat up wouldn't wake until tomorrow, they were even happier. As soon as he stepped foot onto the ship, Thatch had went straight to the kitchen and started hooking the padlocks onto the fridge and a few cupboards that he put his most important and favorite ingredients and spices in. Next he put the padlocks on the door that led to the boys' room. The last 2 locks were ones the Ace and Luffy had picked out. He put the chosen lock on the correct trunk. Ace's lock was a black antique with a red A in the center on both sides, while Luffy's lock was an antique bronze with a skull and crossbones on it. Sabo chose not to get a lock since he was happy with the one that was already there. After putting the locks on, Thatch put a little tag on the correct key, saying which lock it went to, then put the keys in the top drawer of Sabo's desk. With nowhere to go, the 3 brothers went to the dining hall and waited for their board to be turned into dinner. After some time, the silence became awkward. "When we were in town," Luffy muttered, breaking the silence almost as soon as it became uncomfortable. You noticed what? Yoy? Marco asked, causing the boys to look at him and notice Thatch next to him. When we were in town, I noticed we were being watched. I didn't see who or from where, but I could feel it, Sabo informed. It felt like I was prey and a beast was hunting me. It felt so weird, Ace muttered. It could have been the people. We aren't exactly the most casual or well-hidden people. We are famous pirates after all, Thatch commented. That's not what it felt like though. I know what it's like to have people stare at you like you were a freak. This wasn't like that though. It felt almost like someone was following and hunting us. It was almost scarier than being in between the giant bear and Tiger Lord, Luffy muttered. Exactly. Ace and Sabo said in unison. Ease up. Have something to eat when dinner's ready, then go to bed. We'll figure it out tomorrow. No need to worry. Remember your family's here, Thatch said with a smirk. Okay, thanks, Luffy said with a smile while his brothers nodded and smiled. XXX on top of a large building, a man stood and stared in the direction of the giant ship with the whale figurehead. His navy blue tailcoat swaying gently in the breeze as his black top hat slowly began to fall off his head. Gently, he grabbed the edge of the old and burnt top hat, pulling it down and onto his head more, stopping it just above his dark blue eyes. So you made it, a voice said from behind him. The man turned around and looked at the owner of the voice. Koala, why didn't you tell me? He asked. Would you have believed me if I said I found younger versions of you and your brothers? Koala asked with a small smirk. It's my brothers we're speaking of. How does one get stabbed through the stomach with a poisonous hook and still survive? The man asked. Touché. But now that you've seen them, what do you think? Koala asked. My younger self truly is the odd one out. Ace and Luffy would know that isn't me. They're most likely being manipulated. I still don't understand how Ace had been brought back or how they were turned into kids and lost their memories, the man said. How do you explain the little you then? Koala asked curiously. Most likely a devil fruit. There have been some that allow the user to change their appearance. Even some that allow the user to change the age of someone else. We can't rule out that belief. There just isn't enough information at the moment to figure out the cause of this incident, the man said. True. Oh, and by the way, you're showing your origins through speech again, Sabo, Koala said teasingly. My apologies. My first 10 years, I was forced to learn how to use formal speech. Along with how often I've had to be formal in the past 10 years, it's become quite the bad habit. The man, Sabo, explained. Alright. Can you try to lighten up on it? Sometimes it's hard to understand, Koala stated. I'd rather not attempt it. Especially after what happened last time, Sabo said. Last time? Koala asked. Sabo sighed. I attempted to stop my bad habit and wasn't able to give a true and convincing speech when it was needed. So, you're just doing this because it's fun and you know it annoys me, aren't you? Koala questioned. Indeed. Very smart, mademoiselle, Sabo said with a playful bow. Stop it. Koala said with a smile. Shouldn't you be more focused on your brothers and doppelganger rather than teasing me? They know I'm watching them. I made it fairly obvious. They'll most likely be hiding away for the rest of the night, then try and find me tomorrow, Sabo stated. And, Koala asked. We'll see then. Just you wait, Sabo said with a smirk. Just you wait. When dinner was finished cooking, the entire Whitebeard crew had gone to the dining hall. Within seconds of the people flooding in through the doors, the conversation started back up. Everyone spoke about random things. Eventually some of the men started talking about cute girls they saw in the village, causing the women to get angry and punch them in the heads. After a few minutes, people started talking about the meat and how good it was. Everyone started yelling for more and asking Thatch where he got the great ingredients. Every time the question was brought up, Thatch just said for them to ask the 3 youngest members of the ship. Soon enough, there was a large crowd around the 3 boys. The boys looked at each other, all with bored expressions before shrugging. There's nothing to tell, the brothers said in unison, boredom lacing every word. What do you mean there's nothing to tell? I saw you 3 carrying huge animals by yourselves like it was nothing, a crewman shouted. Yeah, they were weak. Back home, we fought crocodiles at least twice that size every day, Luffy stated before taking another bite out of his meat. Seriously, most the crew yelled, excluding the commanders. Yeah. Those things were nothing but small fry. It's actually pretty sad how weak they were, Ace muttered carelessly. You know they're weak if even Lu can take them out. It's saddening really, Sabo said with a small smirk and chuckle. Sabo, Luffy whined. That's mean, you know I'm strong. Sure, whatever you say Lu, Sabo muttered quietly as he went back to staring at the table. It actually was pretty sad. They all went down in only a few seconds. Even Lu's went down pretty fast, Ace said. Maybe he's stronger than you think, a crewman said with a smirk, obviously remembering the older Luffy. Yeah right. He couldn't fight to save his life, Ace stated as the man who spoke up was punched in the head by another crewmate. Why'd you punch him? Luffy asked, suddenly appearing next to the man who spoke up and the man that punched him. He had a fly on his head. I was getting it off, the puncher said, slightly nervous. After a few moments of Luffy staring at the man, the boy grinned. Okay, you're really nice. He's so gullible, Sabo muttered quietly to himself, accidentally speaking loud enough for Ace to hear. Sabo? Ace questioned. You aren't acting like yourself, you okay? Huh? Oh yeah. Just thinking about when we were in town, Sabo stated as he looked at Ace. What happened in town? Vista asked calmly. While we were walking around, we all felt like someone was following us. Almost like they were hunting us. It's hard to stop thinking about it, Ace said. If it's bothering you so much then how about this, Yoi? We go back to town tomorrow and have a few of the crew follow us. If the person follows you again, then the others will catch them, Yoi, Marco suggested. I don't know, it sounds kinda dangerous, Sabo muttered. You don't think we can do it? Haruta asked, faking hurt. That's not it, I mean, Sabo stuttered before sighing. Don't worry about it. We'll be careful and make sure you don't get hurt or caught, Thatch informed as he walked through the crowd and up to the table. I think the only one we need to worry about when it comes to injuries is you Thatch, Sabo said with a smirk. Hey, not my fault your Gramps is crazy, Thatch pouted, causing everyone to laugh. After about an hour of talking about random topics, Sabo quietly stood from the table and left the room. The only ones who noticed were Ace, Luffy, Marco, and Thatch. All four deciding to stay instead of follow, believing the boy just wanted some privacy. He would have said something if he wanted to talk, the four thought in unison. XXX slowly and quietly, Sabo walked through the halls of the Mobi. His eyes glazed over with boredom and hidden annoyance as he inspected the lower levels. After some time, he was at the very back and in a small room he had found. He had claimed the room as his own on the first day they were there. He liked it mostly for the fact that it seemed nobody went that far into the ship. Damn it, Sabo muttered as he entered the small wooden room. Quickly he walked over to the small desk and pulled out a notebook and pen. He sat on the old chair and began flipping through the notebook. After a few moments, he had gotten to the last written page and read it over carefully. This isn't right. What did I miss? Sabo muttered in annoyance as he kept reading. After a few minutes, Sabo threw the notebook at the wall then threw the pen, causing it to stick into the wooden door. Damn it! How is this happening? What is going on? Sabo yelled to himself. There were a few moments of silence before Sabo groaned and opened the door, slamming it angrily as he left the room. XXX quickly and quietly, Sabo snuck into the room he shared with his brothers and attempted to get into his bed and sleep. Instead he was stopped when the light suddenly turned on, causing him to freeze. Sabo, Luffy called out from behind said boy, where'd you go? What do you mean, Lu? Sabo asked slowly as he turned to the younger boy, instead coming face to face with Ace. We were having fun when all of a sudden you started spacing out. Then you left for no reason. What the hell? Ace questioned. I wasn't feeling that good and wanted some fresh air. That's all, Sabo stated. Then why did I see you going below deck? Luffy asked. Huh? Sabo sounded. I was worried and wanted to know what was wrong. I saw you heading below deck. What did you do down there, Sabo? Luffy questioned. Nothing. I was just taking a walk, Sabo said. I thought you said you weren't feeling good, Ace said with slight suspicion. Everyone was crowding us. I wasn't feeling well because of the cramped space, Sabo informed. Here's another question for you. Why do you keep disappearing? Ace questioned. What do you mean? Sabo asked. Every once in a while, we want to talk to you or play or something, but we can never find you. Where do you go? Luffy asked. Nowhere. I just walk around. Now if you would please, I'm getting tired and I would like to sleep, Sabo said before turning around and walking over to his bed. Quickly, the blonde got into his bed and turned to face the wall, his back to the room's other two occupants. After a few moments, Ace sighed and went to his bed, laying so his back was to his brothers. Luffy stood in the center of the room and looked between his two brothers. Luffy sighed before getting into his bed and laying so he faced the ceiling. "Good night," Luffy whispered. "Night," Ace and Sabo muttered in unison by accident. For the next few minutes, there was nothing but silence as Luffy stared at the ceiling above him. Slowly, he fell into the dark abyss known as sleep. XXX the next morning, the happenings of the night before were nearly forgotten. Quickly, the three boys ran to the dining hall and began their breakfast. When they had finished eating, they ran out to the deck and quickly saw Marco and Thatch smiling at them. Soon enough, the group of five was back on land and walking around the streets. Quickly they found a craft store, a clothing store, a weapons smith, and later the same baker as from the day before. When they got to the baker, they were all slightly saddened when they saw someone else working the shop instead of the woman from before. "Excuse me? Where's the woman from yesterday?" Thatch asked. "What woman? And what are you talking about? I'm the only person who works here and my shop was closed yesterday," the owner said. "Then, who was that girl?" Ace questioned quietly. "You think she works with the guy who's following us?" Sabo asked. "Possibly, we don't have enough information on that just yet though, Yoi," Marco said before turning back to the shop owner. "My apologies. Thank you for your time, Yoi." Quickly, the group left the shop and continued looking around. Every once in a while they would see something they thought they didn't see the day before and check it out. After an hour of walking around, they all felt as if they were being hunted. For the next 30 minutes, they acted as though they hadn't noticed and just kept walking around. XXX After nearly 2 hours of following the small group, Vista and Haruta had decided now was the time to act. Quickly, the two ran across rooftops and easily caught up to the follower. When they had landed on the same roof as the follower, the man stood and faced them. He was dressed entirely in different shades of blue and slightly like a noble. The only things that weren't blue were his black top hat, which carried blue goggles, his white shirt and cravat, which were mostly covered by a navy blue tailcoat with rolled up sleeves, and his black boots, which were barely covered by his navy blue pants. Even his eyes were the same color as his coat and pants. "Good morning. Can I help you?" the man said in a gentle voice as he bowed his head slightly. "Why are you following them?" Vista questioned, immediately getting to business. "Simple. I would like to know a thing or two about them. That is all," the man said with a small smile. "What's that supposed to mean?" Haruta asked with slight annoyance. The man chuckled. "Now, why would I tell you? Excuse me?" Haruta questioned with some anger and annoyance. "How am I to explain to you what I don't know? It seems impossible to do so, correct?" the man asked, genuinely curious. "Speak English," Haruta shouted with annoyance. The man sighed. "There's something about those boys that is different. I want to know what and how. If I don't know about it, then I can't explain it," he said slowly. "I'm not stupid," Haruta shouted with anger and was about to launch at the man but was stopped by Vista. "What makes you think there's something different about them?" Vista asked. "Simple. That's Portgas D. Ace and Monkey D. Luffy when they were 10 and 7 years old. I would like to know how they are young again. I'd also like to know how Ace is alive," the man said. "Who are you? How do you know them?" Vista questioned. "They're famous and their appearances haven't changed much. Along with the fact that I knew them when we were young, it's easy for me to tell it's them. Also, I'd prefer to keep my identity hidden seeing as how I'm not supposed to be known yet," the man said. "If you aren't supposed to be known, then why are you talking now?" Haruta asked, having calmed down some. "Why indeed?" the man said thoughtfully. "You're just playing with us, aren't you?" Haruta questioned with annoyance. "Perhaps I am. Perhaps I am not," the man said with a smirk. "Screw you too," Haruta muttered, causing the man to chuckle. "My apologies. Those two always made me act differently, I presume you could say," the man said apologetically. "What do you mean by that?" Vista questioned. "Tell me, how many of you have changed due to simply knowing Ace? How many more have changed due to knowing Luffy?" the man questioned with a knowing smile. "Nearly everyone," Vista muttered in realization. "Precisely. They have a strange ability. No, whether you like it or not, those two can change you, the man said. You forgot Sabo. Haruta stated. Oh, care to inform me of him? The man questioned with a smirk. I thought you said you knew them. Haruta sighed before describing the boy in question. He's smart and is the only one who can actually control the other two. He's impressive. I chose to take that as a compliment, the man said with a smile. What? Haruta asked. Nothing, the man chuckled. If it's nothing then why say it? Vista questioned. Fair enough. I shall tell you. Really, if you can figure it out, the man said with a smirk, cutting off Haruta. I'm really starting to hate you. Haruta said. If you so strongly dislike me, then why are you holding back? You were supposed to catch me, correct? The man asked. Yes. We are and we will. Vista stated. Then how about I make it easier for you? The man suggested. How would you do that? Vista asked. Simple. The man said as he put his hands up and smiled. I surrender. Wait. What? Haruta questioned out of confusion. I surrender. Do with me what you wish. I'm your prisoner. The man stated, still smiling. Why? Haruta asked suspiciously. I would like to ask those boys a few questions. You won't allow me to do so unless locked up. Am I correct? The man asked. Correct. Vista said as he let go of Haruta and grabbed the man's arms, pulling them behind his back. Let's go. As Vista started to head back to the ship with the man, Haruta ran over towards the small group of 5, telling them the follower was captured. XXX. When he got to the ship, the man was put in a cell at the bottom of the ship. He sat in his little cell quietly and peacefully. After a few minutes, he started getting bored and chose to inspect the bars. He had to admit, he was impressed with how thick the kairoseki was. After a few moments of wondering how much it cost, he hit one bar multiple times near the top and bottom at lightning speed. After a few seconds of waiting, the bar fell over on its own and landed in the man's slightly outstretched hand. With the bar in his hand, he walked back over to the wall and sat against it. He quickly assessed how much of a weapon the bar would make and decided it was good enough. For a little while, the man did nothing but play with the bar, either spinning it or tossing it in the air and catching it. Soon enough he heard light footsteps and smirked when he realized who it was. So, you finally show yourself, the man said. What are you doing here? The visitor questioned. I just wanted to talk to my brothers and you. Is that so bad? The man asked. That isn't what I meant, the visitor stated. Oh, the man sounded curiously as he finally looked at his visitor. I meant what are you doing in the world of the living, Sabo? The visitor questioned angrily. I'm living. Simple as that. The man, Sabo, stated with a smirk. Although, I must know one thing. That would be? The visitor asked. Who are you and why do you look like me when I was 10? Sabo questioned. Surely this isn't just a coincidence. Perceptive. I'm impressed. But how did you find out? The visitor questioned. You're supposed to be copying me. Figure it out. Sabo said with a smirk. Silence reigned over them as the younger Sabo thought. He had misjudged the intelligence of the man before him and he knew it. As if the man had read his mind, he spoke what the younger had been thinking. I suppose you already know of your failure, the older man spoke. I do. I'm sure you already understand your incredible luck, the younger stated. I've been told multiple times of it. Would you like to add in your 2 cents? The older said with a smirk. You were shot by a celestial dragon. You should have died, the younger shouted. Technically, the first shot hit my boat and the second I dodged just in time to have it barely graze my arm. The older said as he lifted his sleeve to show a few burn marks and a well-sized scar where the shot had hit. If not by the bullet then the fire should have killed you, the younger shouted with anger. While dodging, I had run into a few more flames, causing the burn on my face, and happened to stumble into the water. Before you suggest death by drowning, Dragon saw me fall in and came after me. He saved my life and I owe it to him, the older said. The younger stared at the older in pure annoyance before continuing. How'd you find us? Didn't I tell you to figure it out? The older said with a playful smile. Quit screwing with me, the younger said as he punched the bars separating the two, leaving a large dent in a few of the bars. Purely accident. Dragon was curious as to what this crew was doing and sent one of our agents. She saw you 3 and called me, instructing me to come to this island, the older stated. Who? The younger questioned. You like questioning me, don't you? The older asked. Who? The younger questioned again. Why should I tell you? The older asked with a smirk. Tell me or else I'll kill your brothers, the younger yelled. Who? The older asked quietly with wide, shock-filled eyes. Ace and Luffy. By the way, Ace is alive now. He was brought back due to Luffy's wish, so he is able to die again. Once I get my wish, I'll kill them. I don't care about them like you do. I'm not you, the younger said menacingly. Immediately, the older was at the bars, glaring at his doppelganger dangerously while nearly shattering the bar in his hand. Leave them alone or else I'll murder you myself. I don't care what it takes or who you are. If you hurt my brothers in any way, I'll kill you immediately, the older growled. Overprotective now are we? The younger teased with a smirk. My brothers are my life. My reasons for living. I won't let them die so easily, the older informed. Then tell me one thing. Why did you let Ace die? Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you try to find Luffy after Ace died? What kind of brother are you for not caring about your brothers? Especially when they're so important to you. The younger asked evilly. You don't know anything, the older shouted as the pole in his hand shattered into a million pieces. Oh, care to explain? The younger asked with fake shock. I wanted to be there. I wanted to stop that war. I wanted to save Ace. I wanted to find Luffy and be there with him to calm him down. To at least tell him he isn't alone. I wasn't allowed to though. Dragon wouldn't let me leave. At one point I tried to run away but he caught me. He locked me in my room for a month. When I didn't hear anything about Luffy, I thought both of them were dead and I broke down. This was the first time I was allowed to leave. Had I known they were alive, I easily would have searched for them. So don't you dare say I don't care about my brothers, the older informed. Oh, poor baby, the younger said with obvious sarcasm. The older sighed as he lowered his head, the brim of his hat covering his eyes. Let me see them. I just want to talk to them. They don't know you. They won't recognize you. So why do you want to see them so badly? The younger asked with mild curiosity. I just want to know they're safe. You say they don't remember my death, correct? The older asked. Yes, the younger said hesitantly. What's the last thing they remember? The older asked quietly. Excuse me, the younger asked. What is the last moment they remember? How much of their memories of our past did they forget? The older asked, a little louder this time. Everything from the moments before you left them, all the way to present day. They don't remember you leaving and going back to Goa Kingdom or anything afterwards, the younger stated with a raised brow. So, only the better memories remain. That's good to know, the older said with a small smile before looking at the younger with narrowed eyes and a serious expression. If I find out you've changed anything more than that or that you've harmed them in any way, there will be nowhere to run. What's with all the hostility? You're the most level-headed out of the three of you and yet you're acting like Ace when he was young and had anger issues, the younger said. Don't compare me to a man you don't know, especially when that man is my past brother, the older warned. First of all, I have your memories of childhood. I know who he is. Secondly, he isn't past any longer. I revived him less than a month after he died, the younger stated. You revived him? How? Are you a devil fruit user? The older questioned. Now why would I want to answer that? The younger teased. You came down here to question me, I would presume. Now, I believe, all of your questions are out of the way, so shouldn't it be my turn? The older asked. Fair point, but not one I agree with, the younger stated. If I may I ask, which part? Are you not finished questioning me? Or is it you just don't want to give me answers? The older questioned. I've gotten all I need to know from you. I just prefer not to answer. Now if you'll excuse me. My brothers will be worried about me, the younger said with a smirk before leaving. XXX. Once the younger Sabo had left, the older let out a sigh and sat against the wall. He stared at the ground and thought, going over the previous conversation in his mind. Soon enough, he heard footsteps leading to his cell. At first, there were no words or any sense of conversation, but after some time, Sabo finally looked up. At first he was confused as to why the man was there, but he chose not to dwell on it for too long. 1st Division Commander turned Captain, Marco the Phoenix. How are you these days? Sabo asked calmly. What was that conversation about, Yoi? Marco asked, getting straight to his point. You overheard? I must say, I'm surprised I didn't find you sooner. How much of it did you hear exactly? Sabo questioned. All of it. Care to explain it to me, Yoi? Marco asked. You wouldn't believe me. You care about them too much to agree with someone who would say otherwise of the boys, Sabo stated. I'd be willing to listen at the least, Yoi, Marco said. Fair enough. Ace and Luffy are the real Fire Fist and Straw Hat turned children. Ace was even brought back to life. At least that's what I could get clearly, Sabo explained. And Sabo? Marco asked. Never died, Sabo stated bluntly. Care to explain him since you know him so well, Yoi? Marco asked. Never died, never turned into a child, like Luffy. That kid is an imposter. Trying to use Ace and Luffy to gain his wish. I don't know how that works or what the wish is, not even who he is. I just know he's not who you think he is, Sabo explained. And you would know that how, Yoi? Marco questioned suspiciously. Because I'm Sabo, Ace and Luffy's brother. I never died, obviously, and I'm still 20. To put it simply, he made a mistake, Sabo explained. How so? Marco asked, choosing to question the familial bonds later on. He thought I actually died and thought he could replace me. He found out too late that I was alive. I don't understand why he needed to copy me though, Sabo stated. Understandable. That story of how you survived an attack like that, was it true, Yoi? Marco questioned. I was lucky. If it hadn't have happened, I would have died if I had himself. I'm glad it happened. Although I could do without the scars. Sabo said with a small chuckle as he nervously scratched the burn scar on his cheek. How old were you, Yoi? Marco asked. 10 years old, Sabo answered, somewhat sadly. Do you know what you were attacked for, Yoi? What reasons? Marco questioned. I sailed my boat in front of his ship while waving a black flag. He didn't even care that I was a kid. Not surprising now that I think about it, Sabo stated. Not surprising. Although that doesn't make it right, Yoi. Those bastards believe themselves to be higher beings when in actuality they are lower than any pirate. Marco practically growled. Very true, I must say. Sabo commented. To return to the main topic, what would be the complete reason as to why you were following them, Yoi? Marco asked after taking a calming breath. I heard there was something I needed to see. When I saw them I started questioning many things. At first, I thought they were just look-alikes, but that theory came to a halt when I heard their names and saw how they reacted to certain things. After that, I just wanted to know what kind of sick joke this was. My older brother died and then my younger brother was believed to have died as well. I wanted to know who it was that came up with that idea just so I could take some of my anger out on them, but with what I was just told, Ace is alive as a 10-year-old while Luffy is 7 again. I just want to figure out how to give them their memories back along with their age. I can't let them stay like that any longer, Sabo explained. I understand your point of view and that you are of no danger to us. I would let you out now but my crew is still skeptical of you. My apologies but it appears you will have to stay in there for the night, Yoi, Marco said apologetically. I understand. I'd much rather be in this cell rather than be attacked by Ace's family. Although I must say this is a fairly horrible first impression, Sabo said with a small chuckle. I would assume so, Yoi. I shall see you in the morning. Thatch will most likely stop by to give you something to eat, Yoi, Marco stated. Thank you. Sabo said silently before turning away and going back into his thoughts. As the sun rose, so did the crew of the Moby. The morning was usual. As soon as breakfast began cooking, the 3 youngest boys had woken up and raced to the dining hall. Immediately, the boys were at the counter and watching the chefs cook all the various foods. Every once in a while, a chef would secretly sneak the boys a little taste of what they were cooking. When the chefs had deemed most of the food ready, they asked the boys to ring the bell, announcing it was time to eat. Luffy had immediately stood from his spot and ran to the bell, ringing it happily when he got there. During their time on the ship, Luffy was the one to ring the bell. He had found it entertaining and had rang it loud enough that people within a mile or so of the bell could hear it. Soon enough, the crewmen and women started entering the hall and smiling when they smelled the food or saw the boys. Slowly, everyone faded into a single file line so they could get breakfast. After about a half hour, the 3 youngest boys had finally gotten their food. The boys had agreed they would be the last in line during every meal, seeing as how they weren't as hungry considering they had been given snacks while the chefs were cooking. That was Sabo's mindset at least. Ace and Luffy had considered it as, they got everything that was left over, which was a good amount of food. After an hour of eating and talking with each other, the crew finally remembered their prisoner. Just as Thatch was about to leave the room with their prisoner's food, Luffy had stretched his arm to grab it. As Luffy's arm returned with a new plate in his hand, Sabo had reached up enough to grab the plate before the contents were eaten. "This is for the prisoner, right?" Sabo asked as he turned to the head chef. "Yeah. Why?" Thatch asked curiously. "I'll take it to him if you want," Sabo volunteered. "Are you sure? He was stalking you three and now you want to talk to him?" Thatch questioned. "All I'm going to do is give him his food. I'm not going to talk to him unless I absolutely have to," Sabo said as he stood from his chair and started walking towards the door. "Just be careful around him, all right?" Thatch asked worriedly. "Don't worry," Sabo said with a smile before leaving the room. XXX After 30 minutes of the young blonde not returning, the crew started worrying. Soon enough, Thatch, Vista, Haruta, Ace, and Luffy all went to find the young noble. Almost as soon as they left the room, they started running to the cells. Once they got to the staircase leading to the cells, they all saw Sabo lying face down and unconscious on the stairs. Immediately, they all started panicking and ran to the boy. Vista quickly picked him up and turned him over. The large man and the ones around him were shocked to see the condition the boy was in. Sabo looked to have been beaten pretty badly. He had a black eye and small nosebleed, which seemed to have stopped, along with a cut on his lip. His arms and legs had small cuts, scratches, scrapes, and bruises. A well-sized bruise on his neck. His blue clothing having small hints of crimson on them. His face slightly contorted into one of pain. "Sabo," Thatch muttered, feeling a tinge of guilt for letting the boy go on his own. Slowly and weakly, the mentioned boy opened his eyes and looked at the people around him. Once his eyes landed on the worried looks of his brothers, he gave a small smile. "What happened?" Ace muttered in shock. Sabo slowly and carefully shook his head, attempting to tell his brother it was nothing. The look in his eyes betrayed the motion, however. He stopped shaking his head when he was facing the cells, his eyes watching as if scared something will come after him. "Was it him? The prisoner?" Haruta questioned. Sabo looked at her for a second before slowly nodding. Instantly, the group was angry. No, not angry. They were furious. Even Luffy had been angry. With or without knowing, they were all glaring towards the cells. They were all so busy glaring, that they all failed to realize someone was walking down the stairs towards them. "What are you doing, Yoi?" Marco questioned, startling them all. "Marco!" Thatch exclaimed as he ran up to said man. "The prisoner attacked Sabo. We found him unconscious on the stairs." Marco was quiet as he stared at the young blonde in Vista's arms. Slowly, he walked closer to the large man and took the 10-year-old from his arms. Now carrying Sabo, Marco continued walking down the stairs. "Marco, where are you going? He needs help," Haruta shouted to the older blonde. Marco ignored the protests and continued walking. He looked down at the noble in his arms and noticed shock, confusion, and slight anger in the boy's eyes. He allowed a small smirk to grace his lips, confusing the boy further. Once they were at the bottom of the stairs, Marco turned to the cell and allowed his smirk to grow if only a little. "Sabo, how do you feel, Yoi?" "Could be better. I have to admit I'm pretty hungry though. Damn brat showed me the food then threw it out the porthole," the prisoner said while playing with a piece of pipe, muttering the last part as he glared at said porthole. "I see. Remind me to bring something down later, Yoi," Marco said thoughtfully. "Marco, what are you talking about? And why did you call that bastard, Sabo?" Haruta questioned. "Hey," the prisoner sounded, his head snapping back to his visitors. "Because he is Sabo, Yoi," Marco stated simply. Suddenly, the smaller Sabo's eyes widened in realization. He stared at Marco with shock covering his beaten features. Marco couldn't help the amused smirk that crossed his lips as he saw a flash of anger cross the boy's features. "Liar!" Luffy shouted. "There's only one Sabo, don't you dare try and say that man who beat up our brother is Sabo," Ace yelled at Marco. "Ace, Lu," the prisoner muttered in shock before letting it set in. "Wait. Beat up? I didn't beat up anyone." "Then explain his injuries," Vista shouted, pointing at the small boy in Marco's arms. The prisoner simply pointed to the pieces of blood-covered metal near the bars, far from him. I'll admit, he may have pissed me off last night and I may have broken a bar or two, but he's the one who used the pieces to wound himself. Do you know how weird that is? What? The fact that you're lying, Haruta growled. Now, no need to growl. First of all, I'm not lying. He picked up the pieces and started cutting and bruising himself. Secondly, the weird part of it all is watching you destroy your own body. I mean, it was like an out-of-body experience. Kinda like a ghost possessed my 10-year-old body and forced me to wound myself. So strange, the prisoner said, voice fading off into thought towards the end. Don't talk like that. You aren't Sabo. You aren't our brother. You're just some weird-ass stalker, Ace shouted angrily. Instantly, the prisoner's eyes widened in shock, sadness, and fear before he pulled his hat down to hide his eyes. Everyone had seen the emotions though. The prisoner was even shaking slightly. You don't mean that, the prisoner muttered, his voice shaking slightly. Ace would never say that to one of his brothers. Maybe with Lou at first, but not now, not to me. Stop calling him that. You don't know Luffy, so stop calling him Lou, only Sabo and I can call him that, Ace yelled, getting angrier by the minute. The man was silent as he fell back to lay on the floor, not caring much about the pain from the fall and just focusing on the boys. Lou, I know you want to say something, just say it. You feel the same as Ace, right? He muttered just loud enough for the room's occupants to hear. I said stop calling him that, Ace shouted, interrupting the younger Raven. You've always had great instincts. Maybe not that much brain power, but you could always tell when a person was good or bad. So what do you think of me? The prisoner asked, ignoring Ace, as he slightly turned his head towards Luffy, his hat still shadowing his eyes. I don't know, you seem familiar, but I don't know one thing. I feel like I can trust you, Luffy said, smiling at the end. Luffy! Ace shouted in slight anger and shock. Ace, you and your trust issues need to calm down, the prisoner said with a small chuckle. You stay out of this, Ace yelled angrily at the prisoner. You really shouldn't act so calm with him just yet, Yoi. Considering just yesterday you were a stalker, Marco reminded. Oh yeah, the prisoner said as he turned his head towards Marco, his eyes still not showing. You mind putting him down? It's a little weird seeing that. I'd be happy to, Yoi. Marco said as he walked over to a smaller cell that was across from the prisoner and dropped the boy inside before locking it. Marco, Thatch, Vista, Haruta, and Ace all yelled while Luffy continued staring at the prisoner with curious eyes. Slowly, Luffy walked up to the prisoner's cell and stared at him carefully. He was about to touch the bars when the prisoner put up his hand and stopped the young straw hat wearer. These bars are kairoseki. Pretty strong too. I prefer you not get hurt, the prisoner said kindly. Who are you? Luffy unknowingly asked. Like Marco said. My name is Sabo, the prisoner said as he sat up and looked fully at Luffy, his dark blue eyes finally being revealed. When Luffy saw those eyes, he felt like he was going to cry. Those dark blue orbs were practically glowing with kindness and familiarity. He didn't know why, but he felt like he knew those eyes. They were a little dark shade of blue than Sabo's eyes, and he had to admit it was a better shade. Bo. Luffy muttered softly, almost as if testing if the name fit the man. The prisoner smiled kindly at the young Raven. He missed his little brother and knew he would meet him again. He just never expected to meet the boy when he was a child still. He could still see the innocence in the boy's eyes that was there 10 years prior. Luffy, completely dazed and still staring at the man's eyes, reached out again. His small rubbery hand grazed the bars, causing him to get weak and quickly pull his hand back. When he saw worry in those dark blue orbs, he blushed lightly in embarrassment. I warned you, didn't I? The prisoner asked with a kind tone as he stood and walked over to the boy. Quickly, the prisoner hit certain spots on two of the poles and gently pulled on them. When the bars came off, there was a hole in the cell large enough for the man to walk out. Immediately, the three commanders were on guard and waiting for him to come out and try to escape. Much to their surprise, the prisoner had returned to where he had been sitting and tossed the bars to the side. He sat cross-legged as he leaned against the wall and looked at Luffy with a small smile before patting the spot next to him, inviting the boy in. Without a second thought, Luffy ran in and stood in front of the noble-looking prisoner. He stared at the man for a little while before staring intently at the top hat. Noticing where the boy's gaze landed, the prisoner took off his hat and put it in front of the young raven. "Look familiar?" he asked simply. "Yeah, that's Sabo's hat and goggles. Why do they look so old and beat up?" Luffy asked innocently. "I've had this hat for over 10 years. It's carried all of my adventures. A lot can happen in that amount of time," the prisoner stated with a fond smile, remembering a few of his favorite moments. "Cool," Luffy exclaimed. "Oi! Get out of there, Luffy. You can't trust that prisoner," Ace said while glaring at the man. "Okay, I know you won't call me by my name, and I'd much prefer you not call me prisoner. Please address me as Hatter, if not by my name," the prisoner said before mentally slapping himself when seeing Ace's confused look. "Why, Hatter, Yoi?" Marco asked. "A lot of people know me as Mad Hatter. It's easier to call me Hatter," the prisoner, Hatter, said. "Understandable," Marco commented. "How are you taking this so lightly?" Thatch questioned in shock, confusion, and anger. "I spoke to him last night. I'd say I know almost as much as he does about this whole situation, Yoi," Marco informed calmly. "What's he mean?" Luffy asked Hatter innocently. "You wouldn't understand. Don't worry about it just yet. But I'll be sure to tell you when I figure it all out," Hatter said with a smile as he put his hat next to him. Luffy nodded before smiling. Once noticing the hat was moved, Luffy took his chance and sat in Hatter's lap. He had his legs crossed as well with his hands on his knees and was leaning against Hatter's chest. Once feeling the somehow familiar warmth, Luffy snuggled in a little closer. Hatter looked at the boy with some surprise before relaxing and letting the boy do as he wished. He leaned his head against the wall behind him and closed his eyes momentarily, remembering the last time the small raven and he had sat like so. "I never thought we would do this again. The last time we sat like this was after I had fished you out of the river for the 3rd time that day. You wouldn't calm down any other way," Hatter said with a small chuckle at the end. "Yeah, it was really nice. But then Ace came out and got upset because he thought we were ignoring him," Luffy said in a slightly deeper voice before laughing. "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We started picking on him and it ended with him chasing us for 3 hours," Hatter said before laughing as well. "Remember all the times we played Connect the Freckles?" Luffy asked between bits of laughter. "Remember how we never won because Ace would beat us up? That game was funny but always ended painfully," Hatter said as he and Luffy shuddered lightly at the thought. "It was worse when it was just me and Ace. I'd get close and all of a sudden he's awake and angry. He had been out cold for an hour once and I was bored. As soon as I took a step towards him with that marker, he woke up. It wasn't fair," Luffy whined, his voice getting slightly deeper again. "Why would you play alone? We couldn't win when it was both of us," Hatter exclaimed. "You were already gone. You had already been gone for a year," Luffy said sadly. "What?" Hatter muttered in shock as he looked down at the young raven. He instantly noticed the boy looking at him both sadly and happily. The boy's eyes were flashing with happiness, sadness, slight loneliness, knowledge, and maturity. They didn't belong to a 7-year-old. Even a 7-year-old noble didn't have those eyes. "We missed you, Sabo, more than you could ever know. I cried for a week, Ace even cried. But, now you're back. Promise you'll stay this time. Promise you won't leave us like that again. At least give us a warning before you disappear," Luffy practically begged. "Lu," Hatter muttered in shock. From what his impersonator had told him, the boys had no memories of their life beyond a certain point. So how did Luffy remember that? "Please, Sabo. I don't want to lose my brothers again. I want at least one to be there," Luffy muttered sadly. Hatter stared at the small raven for a moment before pulling him into a hug. "I promise. I won't up and leave ever again. I won't put you through that ever again, Lu." "Thank you. Sabo, please fix this. Something's stopping me from taking control of my body for too long. I can barely do this much. I want to go back. Now that I know you're alive, I want to go back to how things were and back to my crew," Luffy whispered so that only Hatter could hear. "I'm trying. How about, when this is over, we all have a huge party and feast? You, me, Ace, your crew, and all of this crew. It'll be a huge party for your guys' return," Hatter whispered with a smile. "Sounds awesome. I can't wait. I have to go now, my control's slipping. I'll see you soon. Sabo and Ace will be there too. Luffy whispered with one last hug before closing his eyes and letting his control fade. It was good talking to you again, Lou. Hatter muttered at the last second before placing the boy in his lap again like nothing changed. The hell was that? Ace shouted before running into the cell and gr him away from Hatter. Just a little conversation. Hatter sighed before muttering. I have to admit, he's gotten smarter. What did you say? Ace nearly growled. Nothing at all, Hatter said simply. Ace, what's going on? Luffy asked confusedly, his eyes now open and shining innocently. Nothing, Lou. He's just messing with you, Ace said in a slightly calmer tone. But he's not like that, Luffy stated. You don't know that, Lou, Ace stated, calming down more. Yeah, I do. I don't know how, but I know he's nice. He's like you, Ace, Luffy said with a smile. What's that supposed to mean? Ace questioned, getting slightly angrier. I can't help but trust him. He's nice and fun and caring like you, Luffy said with a grin, catching everyone off guard. Everyone in the room stood frozen as they let Luffy's comment sink in. Especially Ace, taking it as his chance. Luffy once again walked over to Hatter and sat on his lap like before. Once comfortable, Luffy looked up at Hatter and grinned at him. Hatter couldn't help but smile back before looking at Ace's still shocked face. I promise. You guys will be back to normal soon. I'll take care of it. They all sat there, unknowingly staring at Hatter and Luffy as they smiled at each other as if they had been friends for years. Everyone was silent. Not even sound from the rest of the ship made it to their ears. After a few minutes, a voice rang out in the room. Why you say you're me? Prove it, Sabo stuttered from his cell across from Hatter's. How do you suggest? Hatter asked. Tell me something only Sabo and I know, Ace shouted. Hatter sounded as he thought of something that even Luffy didn't know. He doesn't know anything. I got it, Hatter shouted by accident, unknowingly cutting off Sabo. Shortly before we met Lou, Ace and I were sparring and it turned into a fight. We started going all out. It ended with Ace hitting me in the face, knocking out my tooth, and nearly breaking my ankle. In return, I hit Ace's leg with my pipe. It left a scar on the outside of his left thigh. He never told Dayton since it was easy to hide. By the time we actually took a liking to Lou, our wounds were healed and we didn't need to bring it up. What, is that true, Ace? Luffy yelled in surprise as he turned to face said boy. How did you know that? Ace silently questioned in shock, unconsciously moving his hand onto his left thigh. I was there. I caused it even, sorry about that by the way, Hatter said offhandedly. Don't worry about it, Ace muttered. Why you're kidding me? Even you believe him, Ace, Sabo stuttered. Wah. No, it's just, Ace stuttered before sighing. Nobody knew about that. So how would he? Damn it, he even looks kinda like you, Sabo. That's because I am Sabo, Hatter muttered under his breath, causing Luffy to giggle. You're funny, Luffy said, looking up at Hatter again. Thanks, Lou, Hatter said with a smile as he ruffled Luffy's hair. Quit saying you're me, Sabo shouted as he tried to move closer to the bars. Please. Calm down, Sabo. You don't need to make your wounds worse. Please, Marco. Let us take him to the infirmary, Vista begged. No, not until we get answers, Yoi, Marco stated. What answers? What are you talking about, Marco? Thatch questioned. How about you ask the kid, Yoi, Marco suggested as he turned to Sabo. Ask him what? We already know who he is, Haruta shouted. Or do we? Marco shouted. I heard them talking last night, Yoi. He was acting completely different. I recall hearing him say once he got his wish, he would kill both Ace and Luffy. It's a sad day when a stranger cares more about two boys than their own brother does, Yoi. Care to explain? What, you're kidding, right, Marco? Luffy questioned, slowly getting closer to Hatter. I wish he was, Hatter said sadly as he hugged Luffy comfortingly. But I promise you I won't let anybody hurt either of you. I don't want to lose both of you this time. This time, Luffy questioned. It's nothing, don't worry about it, Hatter muttered sadly. So you overheard? I guess the charade is useless now, Sabo said seriously as he stood with ease, his wounds vanishing instantly. Sabo, Vista muttered. God damn son of a bitch. Ace shouted in a slightly deeper voice as he ran at Sabo's cell. "You're damn lucky there's bars between us. Otherwise, I'd murder you with my bare hands for copying my brother. Nobody, and I mean nobody, screws with my family." "Ace, stop this," Haruta shouted. "You'd do the exact same thing if you saw someone in my body. This is how I last saw my brother, and this son of a bitch is pretending to be him. You'd be pissed too if you saw someone pretending to be me. Especially when you saw me die. Especially when the fucker throws you and your memories down the drain just to screw around with you like you're some goddamn plaything," Ace shouted angrily. "Ace," Hatter muttered. "Sabo, I want you to know, the only reason I'm not destroying these bars and attacking this fucker is because he looks like you. I can't beat up my brothers, you know that more than anyone, so I ask for one thing. Fix all of this. Make them show who they really are so I can kill this bastard," Ace said as he turned towards Hatter with a smirk. Hatter looked at Ace in some shock before showing a grin of his own. "Hey, don't go rolling me out just yet. You know, I also want to punch the kid. Hell, I'm sure Lou wants a whack at, I am too." Ace laughed. "Now you're talking like yourself. You're probably right. Although I have to admit, Lou would probably try to be friends with him while we try to kill him. Maybe if we told Lou they stole meat," Hatter contemplated. "Who stole meat? I'll kill the bastard. That could have been mine," Luffy shouted suddenly. "It's almost scary how easily that worked," Ace muttered. "You can say that again," Hatter muttered disbelievingly. "Let me punch him. I'm gonna kill that bastard. Let me hit him," Luffy shouted in a slightly deeper voice. "You're taking this a little too far considering all we said was he stole meat," Hatter mumbled. "Wait, he stole meat too. Now I really want to kill him," Luffy shouted, getting pissed. "If you weren't talking about meat, then what were you shouting about?" Ace questioned as he walked towards Luffy and Hatter. "He's pretending to be Sabo. Nobody's allowed to do that. Nobody's allowed to mess with my friends and family," Luffy shouted. "Luffy's back," Ace and Hatter said, each with a smirk of their own. "How the hell are you idiots this strong?" Sabo shouted. "What are you talking about?" Thatch questioned with confusion. "They're idiots. How do they have this much mental strength?" Sabo shouted again. "I wouldn't say it's mental strength. Everyone knows Luffy has none of that. But more like willpower. Too stupid to give up, you could say," Hatter stated. "I'm ignoring the mental strength part and just taking the willpower part as a compliment," Ace informed. "You don't even understand what he said, do you, Yoi?" Marco questioned. "Yes I do. He called me an idiot but then said I was strong. Suck on that, Marco," Ace shouted in triumph. Marco, Hatter, and the 3 division commanders all sighed. "That's definitely Ace, Yoi. He wasn't even that stupid as a 10-year-old, Marco commented. "You can say that again," the 3 division commanders said in unison. "Hey, screw you guys," Ace yelled. "Again. How?" Sabo muttered. "Simple. Our willpower allowed us enough strength to come back for short periods of time. Right now you're weak enough to where we can actually be here," Luffy stated. "Holy shit," Hatter muttered. "You're Luffy, right?" "Who's Luffy?" the small raven asked as he looked up at Hatter. Hatter stared at his younger brother with shock, fear, and confusion. Ace wasn't in much better shape as he had the same expression only mixed with worry. Even Marco, Thatch, Haruta, and Vista were slightly fearful and confused. The confusion only raised when the small boy in Hatter's lap started laughing. "You should see your faces, you actually believed it," Luffy shouted between fits of laughter. "Wha? Did Luffy just prank us? Luffy?" Ace questioned, pure confusion lacing his words. I think so," Hatter muttered in shock. "Can we please get back on topic, Yoi?" Marco asked, rubbing his temple. "Topic was?" Ace asked after his remaining shock wore off and Luffy's laughter died. "Him," Hatter said, pointing to Sabo. "Who the hell are you anyways?" "A spirit," Sabo stated bluntly. "A ghost, huh? What are you doing here?" Hatter asked. "Simple. I'm a spirit with a wish. I'm given a chance to gain my wish whenever someone who's lost another loved one dies. In this case, Sabo had died and Ace did too. I, disguised as Sabo, came up to him and told him he could be alive again and the 3 of us could be together again. Luffy made the wish for it to happen and I turned back time," Sabo explained with a smirk. "What's your wish, and why go through all this, Yoi?" Marco questioned. "My wish? To live again. Shortly after I died, I was given an offer. Test the newly dead, and if I find a group that I believe has failed, i.e. they die. In your case, I was to test Ace and Luffy and see how long it took them to realize I wasn't truly Sabo. If it took more than the given amount of time, then they fail and I live. It's all a game really, Sabo explained. But now they know, so that means they pass, Hatter commented. Technically, all they know is that you exist. Ace is still skeptical about you while Luffy likes you. Luffy may have found out who you are, but Ace still isn't fully sure. The rules are for them to find out I'm not Sabo, not that you're alive. The game would have been easier to explain had you not shown up, Sabo said, muttering the last part. Excuse me, how would it have been much different? Hatter questioned. If I hadn't have slipped up, then I wouldn't have to be explaining this to anyone. But of course my slip-up isn't small. In fact, it's massive, Sabo explained. A slip-up? Hatter asked confusedly. Yes. I found out all too late, and stupidly chose to ignore one fact. Sabo was still alive but merely missing to the world, Sabo informed. So now that you've failed, how about you fix everything? Ace questioned with annoyance. How about you shut up and go back to being a kid? You aren't paying attention anyways and we're still playing the game, Sabo suggested in a monotone voice. Sabo snapped his fingers and listened as the sound echoed off the walls. When the echo finally faded, Ace and Luffy's eyes widened as they froze. For a few moments, it seemed the boys even stopped breathing. Suddenly, their eyes faded shut before they collapsed. Before Ace could hit the ground, Hatter had caught him and was now holding both of his brothers. Ace, Luffy, Hatter called out as he shook said boys in an attempt to wake them. What did you do? Haruta questioned, turning to Sabo. Oh, nothing. Merely took their strength away and allowed their younger minds to return. They were annoying, Sabo stated with a smirk. Bring them back. Turn them back into their normal selves, Hatter shouted, glaring dangerously at Sabo. Why should I? Sabo asked with a mischievous smirk. You will or else, Vista commanded. Or else what? Remember you can't hurt me. First of all, I'm a spirit. I can't be harmed. Secondly, I want you to know that this whole test is based entirely off my judgment. If I say they pass, then they do. If I say they fail, then they die. Need I add, if you annoy me further, that changes my opinion as well. So watch what you say and do, Sabo commanded. You bastard, Thatch muttered, somewhat shocked. Watch it. Sabo nearly growled. What do we have to do? How would we turn them back? Hatter questioned slowly, trying to conceal his anger. Easy. Make Ace figure out I'm not really Sabo. I took away his memories of the past few minutes so he still thinks I'm Sabo and you're just some prisoner, Sabo stated. What about Luffy? Hatter asked. Believe it or not, his mind is very complex. I couldn't remove what he knows about you. Luffy may be on your side, but Ace knows he trusts too easily. Ace won't listen to him, Sabo said. Fine. We've done it before, we can do it again, Hatter said quietly, looking down at his unconscious brothers in his arms. Done what exactly? Sabo questioned. Changed Ace's heart. Luffy and I got him to open up when we were younger. We know how to persuade him by now, Hatter stated, determination filling his eyes. Plus we're here. We can help too, Thatch said with a smirk. Ace has been with us long enough that we know how to make him understand. It takes a while usually, but he eventually figures it out, Yoi, Marco added. Prove it. You say you know him well, but he's different. You thought he was untrusting as an adult. You have no idea how bad it was when he was younger, Sabo stated. There can't be too much of a difference, Vista muttered. The difference is huge, Hatter informed as he looked up at the division commanders and captain. Ace trusted nobody. It took almost a year to get him to trust me and about the same amount of time to trust Lou. Eventually he started trusting people only because Luffy and I did. I don't even know if he stopped trusting people or kept trying after I left. Well, obviously he learned to trust people seeing as how he's part of the family, Thatch said. True, Hatter muttered. Suddenly, a groan echoed throughout the room. Everyone looked in the direction the sound came from and saw Ace walking up. The freckled raven looked around with blurry eyes, trying to remember where he was. Soon his eyes landed on Luffy and then Hatter. He blinked a few times to clear his vision and went wide-eyed when he realized who it was. "Let go of me! Let go of Luffy!" Ace shouted in a higher-pitched voice as he struggled to get out of Hatter's grasp. Quickly, Hatter let go of Ace, allowing the freckled raven to leave his grasp. As soon as he was free, Ace grabbed Luffy and pulled him away from Hatter. He quickly hid the younger raven behind his back before glaring dangerously at Hatter. "I don't know who you are and I don't care, leave my little brother alone," Ace shouted protectively and angrily. "Ace," Hatter muttered. "Shut up, don't say my name like that, you stalker," Ace yelled. "Ace, you need to calm down, Yoi," Marco said. "What the hell's wrong with you guys? Why are you protecting him? He's a stalker and hurt Sabo," Ace questioned. "Look at him. Sabo's fine, Ace," Thatch commented. "What are you talking about?" Ace asked. They all turned to Sabo and saw he was on the ground, injured. Blood, cuts, and bruises covered his skin and clothes. He was sitting against the bars, panting heavily and nearly wheezing. He opened his eyes slowly and looked at Ace, almost as if begging for help. "Take him to a doctor or something, god damn it," Ace commanded. "Ace, what's with all the screaming?" Luffy questioned sleepily, rubbing his eyes. "Luffy, these people are crazy, crazier than the others," Ace said quietly. "What do you mean? They're really nice, Ace," Luffy said with some worry and sadness. "Luffy," Ace whispered, turning to said boy. "They're supporting the man who hurt Sabo, they aren't helping him." "But, Hatter, he said his name was Sabo," Luffy whispered with more worry. "He was lying, Luffy. He's trying to trick us," Ace said, slightly annoyed. "Why would he? He's nice," Luffy said in slight panic. "No he isn't," Ace yelled. "Ace," Luffy whispered in shock and fear. "Stop it. Both of you," Hatter commanded. "You shouldn't be fighting. You're brothers for God's sake." "Sabo," Luffy muttered before running over to Hatter and hugging him. "Shush, it's okay Luffy," Hatter whispered soothingly as he gently hugged Luffy back. Luffy, get away from him," Sabo called out. "No, why are you being so mean to him? He's nice, he wouldn't hurt anyone," Luffy argued. "You don't know that Luffy," Ace yelled. "Yes I do. I can tell, he wouldn't hurt anyone," Luffy shouted. "Luffy, get over here. Right, now," Ace growled angrily. "No," Luffy shouted, tightening his grip on Hatter. "Stop it, both of you need to stop fighting right now or else I swear I'll call Garp and make him smack some sense into you himself," Hatter yelled with slight anger and annoyance. Ace and Luffy instantly froze at the thought of their grandfather visiting only to pummel them. After a few moments, Ace snapped out of it and got angry again. "You'd love to see that, wouldn't you?" Ace questioned Hatter. "No I wouldn't. I'd hate to see either of you get hurt, especially if it's Garp and his fist of love," Hatter said, shuddering at the thought of Garp's so-called love. "How do you know about that?" Ace asked. "What, his fists? I found out about them 10 years ago. Garp's terrifying and seeing as how he's older, he's most likely stronger as well. I really don't want to run into him when he's serious. I mean, he hit pretty hard when we were just talking about being pirates. Imagine how strong he'd hit now," Hatter said thoughtfully with another shudder. 10 years ago? Now that I think about it, the old man couldn't have aged that much in only a few months, Ace muttered to himself but everyone still heard. "Did he look about 10 years older to you?" Hatter tried. "Yeah, kinda," Ace whispered before looking at Hatter. "How did you?" Ace's voice faded out as he closely looked at the man holding Luffy. He dressed somewhat like how Sabo did. Not really nobility but not a commoner. Most of his outfit was the same coloring as Sabo's clothes. Then he got to the man's face. He had the same dark blue eyes that Sabo had, but slightly darker. His features were much the same if you ignored the burn mark running across his left eye. He even had the same hat, although it looked much more worn out. "Sabo?" Ace questioned slowly and quietly. Hatter smirked and nodded slightly. "It's about time you figured it out." "But how? Sabo's right there," Ace wondered as he looked over to Sabo. "Are we in the future or something?" "Yes and no," Thatch stated. "What does that mean?" Ace asked with annoyance. "It means someone turned you into a kid and took your memories away, Yoi," Marco explained. "You think you're in a certain time period but you aren't and it feels like you're in the future." "I think I understand," Wait, then how come there are two Sabos, and why is only one a kid? Ace questioned. That's what we're trying to figure out. Only you and Luffy really knew Sabo, so we need you two to tell us which one is really him. Pay close attention and think about the past few days. Have you noticed the younger Sabo acting different at all? Haruta asked. Ace was quiet for a moment as he thought. Just as Ace opened his mouth to say something, Luffy cut him off. I like Big Sabo. Little Sabo's been meaner. Like, Ace kind of mean. Hey! Ace shouted before running over and hitting Luffy on the head, causing Hatter to sigh. Don't go cutting me off then calling me mean. Sorry, Luffy apologized as he held the new bump on his head and tried to hold back tears. Ace sighed as he turned back to Marco. As much as I hate to say it, Luffy's right. Sabo's been acting different. A little meaner and more secretive. We always told each other everything. No matter what. But he's been keeping secrets and lying. So, what do you think? Vista asked carefully. It's hard, but at the same time it's easy. I don't know about the big guy, but Sabo's also been acting different. I hate to say it, but something's telling me it's the little Sabo who's a fake, Ace explained. What? Sabo questioned, his eyes wide in shock. I don't know why, but it feels like there's a voice in my head yelling at me. Saying, the kid's a fake, dumbass, Ace said. How? Sabo stuttered. Having a hard time figuring it out. How about I explain it? You lose, Hatter said with a smirk. What are you talking about? Ace questioned. That Sabo is a fake, meant to copy me. He's a ghost in disguise. He turned this into a game to see if you could figure it out. Apparently he thought you were dumber than you really are, Hatter explained. So, I got it right? Ace asked. Yup, Hatter stated simply. Slowly, laughter filled the room, starting out as a simple chuckle then fading into something maniacal. The laughter echoed off the walls almost menacingly. Everyone in the room eventually turned their heads towards the source. Sabo. Immediately, Sabo stopped laughing. Congratulations, you get to live a little longer. The voice that came from Sabo's mouth sounded somewhat like that of a teenage girl. Luffy's eyes slightly widened when he noticed the voice was familiar. A second later, Luffy's eyes were as wide as could be when he realized who it belonged to. Just before he could confront the spirit, a bright white light enveloped the entire room. When the light finally faded, everyone looked around the room. Everything was still in place except a few things. The cell Hatter had previously been trapped in was now fixed, no bars laying on the ground, the giant hole in the side having been put back together. Hatter was still outside of the cage, kneeling down and holding Ace and Luffy close in an attempt to cover their eyes from the light. Marco and Thatch had their arms raised over their eyes to shield out the light. Vista was standing in front of Haruta with his back to the source of the light, covering both of them. But the most noticeable difference was the fact that Sabo was no longer there and his cage had another. Slowly, everyone opened their eyes, Hatter letting go of Ace and Luffy, allowing them to turn around, Marco and Thatch putting their arms down, and Vista turning and moving so Haruta could see. When they all looked at the cell, they scanned over its new inhabitant. It was a girl, about 16 years old, sitting cross-legged with her head leaning on her fist. She had bright azure blue eyes and a soft, warm smile. Her hair was light brown on the top and slowly faded to a darker shade, a dark brown at just past her shoulders where her hair was cut. Her hair was wavy, framed her face perfectly, and was decorated with a small braid on the right side of her head. She had black waist-high pants that went to her ankles and had a few tears here and there. She was wearing a short and tight white shirt with a heart that had an angel wing and half a halo on one side and a blood-red bat wing, red scales, and a bloody horn on the other side with the letters HAHD underneath. On top of the shirt was a denim jacket that fit her hourglass shape perfectly. From what could be seen, it seemed she was wearing a pair of red, black, and white sneakers. She looked at each of the room's inhabitants carefully before stopping and smiling gently at Luffy. After a few moments, she looked away from the young raven and at her hands. She stared at a red and black bracelet that was decorated with a small dream catcher before looking to her other arm. Gently she pet the red heart and traced the stitches on it before tracing out the angel wings behind it. All right. The girl spoke, her voice soft and gentle. Slowly, she stood up and stretched her arms and back. She brushed a few strands of hair out of her face before looking at everyone again. This time, her eyes stopped on Thatch before she let out a small giggle. Soon enough, everyone was looking at Thatch, who had wide eyes and a small red hue crossing his nose and cheeks. Quickly, Marco slapped the back of Thatch's head. "Ow!" Thatch shouted, turning to Marco. "Wipe the drool, yoy," Marco said, slowly shaking his head side to side before pinching the bridge of his nose. The girl giggled again before stretching once more. "Ya know," she muttered, catching everyone's attention. "I always wished I was born a guy. Now that I've been one, I have to say, not that fun." "Who are you?" Sabo questioned. "N. There's only one Sabo now, so, Hatter, is Sabo again." "My apologies for being so rude. My name is, Emilia," Luffy shouted in surprise, cutting the girl off. "I'm surprised you remember," the girl, Emilia, said. "How could I forget? You saved my life," Luffy exclaimed. "What?" the three commanders shouted in surprise while Ace, Sabo, and Marco looked at Luffy in shock. "It was a dream, Luffy," Emilia said with a small giggle at the end. "Care to explain?" Sabo asked. "I had a nightmare about a month ago. I saw Sabo die and was going to save him when she stopped me. Said it was too dangerous. I beat up the celestial dragon who did it but was attacked by one of his guards with a sword. She shielded me. Then I saw Ace get punched straight through and die in my arms. After that I saw Sabo covered in burns and Ace with a hole in his chest, and they were blaming me and beating me," Luffy explained, looking at the ground with sad and wide eyes as if he were reliving the nightmare. Sabo lifted Luffy's head and looked him in the eyes before speaking softly. "Luffy, it's okay. Nothing's your fault. We're perfectly fine." Luffy stared at Sabo for a second before looking at Ace. Ace was standing next to Sabo with a mostly calm expression but worry-filled eyes. Luffy stared at Ace's eyes for a few moments before looking at Sabo again and nodding slightly. Without a second thought, Luffy hugged his brothers tightly and let them go a few moments later. "Why did he see you in his dream, yoy?" Marco asked, turning back to Emilia. "It's a side effect. The one who wished for their family back has to see how the others died and how I died. One scene is usually altered so that my death can look like it actually fit instead of it just being thrown in," Emilia informed. "Although, I must say, having Ace and Sabo blame him wasn't my doing. It was his subconscious. In the dream, he was unable to save Sabo, and in real life he was unable to save Ace. He subconsciously started blaming himself." "Why do you seem so kind all of a sudden? Didn't you say you'd kill them?" Vista questioned. "Once I got what I wanted. I didn't get my wish granted, so I won't. I prefer not to harm anyone, but I will if it means getting what I want. I'll lie, cheat, stab, shoot, steal, and kill if it means getting what I wish for," Emilia stated. "Is that how you got that?" Thatch questioned, pointing to the scar that started at her neck and ended on the part of her stomach that was showing. Emilia looked to where Thatch was pointing and put a hand over the scar on her stomach. "Yeah, it was a job. Sneak onto a pirate ship, steal the treasure, and get a cure for my little brother's illness. At least, that's how it was supposed to be. I got half the treasure off the ship, nearly reaching my goal. On my way off the ship with another chest of gold, a few of the men saw me. I threw the gold overboard to get later, and when I turned back to them, they attacked. I would have been cut in half if I didn't move. Instead I bled to death." "So, you died because of your love for your family? That's actually kinda sad," Haruta muttered. "Who was your little brother? We can check on him if you would like, yoy," Marco asked. Emilia giggled. "There's no need. He passed 20 years ago. I never saw him, but with how often I come back to this world, I know he's gone. But I'm not really all that upset." "Why not?" Sabo asked curiously. "Because he lived how he wanted. Just like Luffy. You know, there's a lot of things that are similar between Luffy and him. The smile, the will, the love for life, the wish to be free, even the hat. Roger would have been proud to meet you," Emilia said with a smile. "Roger, as in Goldie Roger?" Vista asked, earning a small growl from Ace. "Correct. I believe you called him the Pirate King," Emilia stated with a small giggle at the name. "Luffy is nothing like that man," Ace shouted angrily. Emilia stared at Ace for a moment in shock before turning to the others. "What am I missing here?" "You were me for a few months. You should know," Sabo said with slight annoyance. "When the disguise goes, so do the memories that came along with it," I know nothing about you guys now, Emilia informed. The Pirate King was Ace's dad. Luffy stated innocently only to be hit by Ace. Shut up. How many times do I have to tell you to keep that a secret? Ace shouted. But it's so cool, Luffy yelled. You're my little brother's son, Emilia questioned, completely shocked. Ace looked away in annoyance. TCH. Emilia stared at Ace for a few moments before showing a sad smile. Now I see it. You really are his son. Emilia slowly walked towards Ace but stopped at the bars. Taking a calming breath, she took another step and walked through the bars and over to Ace. Just as he turned back to the cell, Emilia knelt down in front of him and hugged Ace. What the? Ace yelped in surprise. Don't hate him, Roger would have loved you more than anything. He would have done anything for you. All he would have wanted would have. He used to tell me all the time what he would do if he had a son. He would have treated you like the most precious thing in the world. If he hadn't been so sick, he'd be next to you right now, telling you how much he loved you. All he ever wanted was a happy family. He never would have wanted you to go through all this. Emilia whispered as small tears left her eyes and found the ground or Ace's shirt. Why, you're serious? Ace stuttered with shock. Emilia pulled Ace away and wiped her tears away before looking him in the eyes. Yes. God, you should have heard him back then. You're the dream child he always wanted. He would have done anything to see you smile. You have a fire in your eyes even brighter than your own flames and he would have been so proud. So please don't hate him. Ace was silent as he stared into Emilia's eyes. After a few moments, he felt a small drop of salty water glide from his eye and down his cheek. He lifted his hand to the small stream and felt the small tears before hugging Emilia tightly. I never got to meet him. I just wanted to meet him once. Emilia smiled before hugging the raven again. After a few moments, she felt a large hand on her shoulder and looked up to see who it belonged to. Her eyes widened when she saw who it was. Roger. Ace tensed slightly at the shocked tone Emilia used and the large hand on his back. He wanted to turn and see if it really was the man that had a helping hand in his being born, but he couldn't move. Slowly, he regained his ability to move and turned to look at the man. Gold D. Roger, Thatch muttered in awe. The Pirate King, how? Vista stared in shock and confusion. Gold Roger, on our ship, Haruto whispered in shock. Just like back then, Yoi, Marco muttered with a small smile. Ace, Sabo and Luffy muttered in shock and slight worry. Slowly, Ace looked at Roger who was kneeling next to him. Ace was speechless. He wanted to yell at the man and take all his anger out on him, but after hearing what Emilia said, he couldn't do it. He just stared at the spirit of his father. Roger stayed still and allowed his son to analyze him while he did the same. Neither had ever seen the other in person. Roger knew Ace had died, but the boy had returned to the world of the living before they could truly meet. True, Roger had been watching over his son for the past 20 years, but he didn't think that counted since they never spoke to each other. Ace, Roger muttered with a small smile. Ace immediately tensed up and had wide eyes. Before anyone could say a thing, Ace ran into Roger and hugged him. Is what she said true? Ace whispered so that only Roger could hear. Every word of it. Roger whispered back, hugging his son in return. Every last word. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for you. Your mother and I have been watching over you for so long. Whenever someone said something bad to you, I just wanted to come down and punch them. But I couldn't. I'm so sorry you couldn't grow up with your parents by your side. It's okay, I have Sabo and Luffy and everyone here. I have another family, so don't worry about me, just watch over me. Okay? I want to meet you and Mom again one day, but not too soon, you know? So please just watch over me. Ace practically begged. Alright. Live your dreams. Make yourself known for what you've done, not who you're related to. Most of all, have fun. Ignore Garp if you have to. Have fun and stay with your loved ones. Roger said with a chuckle. Thank you. I will. Ace said with a smile as he let go of Roger. Slowly Roger stood and looked over the crowd. Monkey D. Luffy. He called, his voice booming and causing said raven to jump and yelp in surprise. Thank you for saving my son. I've been watching you and Sabo as well, and I must say my son could not have chosen better brothers. Your crew is strong. Make sure it stays that way. Also, that hat looks good on you. Really? Luffy asked. I got it from Shanks. Do you know where he got it from? The Pirate King asked. No, he only said it was his treasure and that he got it from his old captain, Luffy stated. He got that hat from me. Roger smiled. Really, I'm wearing the Pirate King's hat? Awesome. Luffy shouted with pure happiness. A smile of pure joy covering his features as he pulled his hat over his eyes. Roger laughed before looking up a little at Sabo. Sabo. Why yes sir? Sabo stuttered nervously. You're smart. Smarter than half the men from my old crew combined. My son needs that. You seem to have a sense of what's too dangerous. Do you mind teaching that to them? Roger asked, pointing to Ace and Luffy. Sabo sighed. You obviously haven't been watching long. I spent years trying to teach Ace when we were kids but he never listened. Luffy, he's Luffy. Enough said. But I can try. I won't give up on my brothers no matter what. Sabo stated with a smirk at the end. Good. Now, Marco. Roger stated before turning to the Phoenix. Quit worrying about your position. You might as well have been the captain for the past few years. Newgate had the title, but you had the job. So quit worrying, just keep doing what you've been doing. You were our enemy, Yoi. Why should I listen to you? Marco questioned. Because that's a message from Newgate himself. He's been watching over this ship with me. When he found out I was coming down, he thought it'd be best if I told you instead of him coming. He didn't want you all to be sad. Roger informed. Oyaji said that, Marco muttered. He did. Also, Thatch, he enjoys you speaking to him in the dead of night. Roger said with a hint of sarcasm. Wait, so I'm not crazy? Thatch questioned loudly, causing Emilia, Roger, and Luffy to laugh while everyone else face-palmed. Emilia. Roger said softly as he turned to his older sister. Yes, Emilia asked softly. Come on. We have to go, Roger said, holding a hand out. Wait, does that mean I don't have to play this stupid game anymore? Emilia asked as she took Roger's hand and stood. Never again. Let's go back together. To Mom and Dad and everyone else. I want you to meet my wife as well, Roger said with a smile. Emilia was shocked for a moment before smiling and nodding, all right. Slowly, Roger and Emilia started to fade away. They closed their eyes, as if accepting what was happening, but soon after, a small voice was heard causing them to open their eyes again. Bye Dad, Ace said with a small smile. Don't say bye. Say, see you later. Goodbyes are forever and I want to see you again someday. Roger said with a small chuckle. I'll see you later Ace. But let me just say, if it's too soon, I'm kicking your ass back here. Ace couldn't help but laugh. Alright. See you later, the young raven said with a smile. I feel like I'm forgetting something, Emilia muttered. Oh well. Probably not important if I forgot. Not even 30 seconds later, Roger and Emilia were gone. Quickly, Ace wiped the few stray tears from his eyes before turning to face the others. He showed a small smile before it faded and he fell to the ground, unconscious. Ace! Everyone shouted in worry. Marco quickly ran to the Raven and checked if he was wounded in any way. Is Ace alright? Luffy asked, voice fading as he fell unconscious. Luffy! Luffy! Sabo shouted. A week has passed since Ace and Luffy fell unconscious. During that time, the Straw Hat Pirates had arrived at Seiki no Shima. Immediately they were taken to the infirmary to see their captain and his brother. They were surprised when they saw that the two were no longer 7 or 10 years old. Instead they looked to be a few years older. Luffy seeming 10, maybe 11, and Ace seeming 13, maybe 14. The next thing they noticed was that the young Sabo wasn't there. Marco and the real Sabo had explained everything to them since Thatch, Vista, and Haruto were still slightly confused. By the time the explanation was completed, they all understood. Within a day, everyone on the Moby had known what was happening to their supposedly dead division commander and his brother. Day and night, Sabo stayed in the room next to his brothers. The only reason he would leave the chair between their beds was to go to the bathroom. He never left the room for more than 5 minutes. By the 5th day, Sabo started getting worried. His brothers had been the correct age for a few hours and still showed no signs of waking up. He was even more nervous when, on the 6th day, their scars from Marineford had appeared. A giant fist-shaped scar on Ace's chest and an X-shaped scar on Luffy's. Sabo was just hoping the effects of the war didn't come back. He didn't want to lose Ace again. On the 7th day, Sabo was sitting in his chair like usual when Marco entered the room. Marco looked at the two sleeping pirates and sighed. He looked back to Sabo and silently motioned for the other blonde to follow him. Sabo nodded and stood from his seat. With a quick glance at his brothers and a silent prayer they would wake up soon, Sabo left after Marco. The two blondes didn't speak much. Marco's intention was to just get Sabo out of the infirmary and get some fresh air for once. Marco couldn't help but think about how unhealthy it was to be locked away in a room for that long, never walking and always nervous. He understood how Sabo felt though. If Sabo wasn't there, then he'd be the one locked in the room with the unconscious brothers. Just as Marco was about to speak, a doctor ran up to them. Both the blondes gained a stronger sense of worry when they noticed how fast the doctor had been running. When the doctor finally stopped running, he put his hands on his knees and started panting heavily, obviously having searched almost the entire ship for them. When the doctor had finally regained his breath, he stood tall and began to speak. Ace and Luffy are showing signs of waking soon. Almost immediately, Sabo grinned widely and ran back to the infirmary, followed by Marco and a few others who had overheard. When Sabo reached the room, he opened the door and looked in. He smiled even more and actually entered the room when he saw Ace sitting up and Luffy barely opening his eyes. Ace looked around the room, his eyes stopping on the semi-noble man at the door. He watched curiously as the man seemed to be smiling and crying at the same time. What do they call those? Tears of joy? But why would he be crying? Ignoring the strange man for now, Ace looked around a little more and saw Luffy just barely waking up. His memory flashed back to the war and how injured the young captain was. He was thankful that those injuries seemed to have healed. Then his memory flashed back to something else. Akainu. That bastard was attacking Luffy when he knew the young raven couldn't move. He had protected his little brother at the cost of his life. He was dead, so how was he here? Ace, Luffy whispered softly in shock, confusion, and happiness. Ace was silent for a moment before he smiled softly and muttered, "Yeah, it's me." He didn't care if he had somehow been healed from the attack or if he died and was somehow revived. He was alive and that's all that mattered for now. Luffy immediately jumped off his bed and tackled Ace into a hug. He couldn't believe it. He had seen Ace die. His older brother had died in his arms for God's sake. But now he was alive. Ace was alive and warm and speaking and everything. Sabo wiped his tears away with his sleeve and walked over to his brothers, putting a hand on Ace's shoulder and smiling happily. "Welcome back." "Thanks, but who are you?" Ace asked, causing Luffy to look up at the noble-like man with curiosity. Sabo sighed. "Does this sound familiar? When we become pirates, we might not be crewmates on the same ship but our bonds will keep us together as brothers. No matter where we are or what we do our bond will not be broken. And so, from this day forward, we're brothers." "What? How do you?" Ace tried to ask but was unable. "Sabo," Luffy asked in shock. "Hey Lu," Sabo said with a smile. "Sabo," Ace and Luffy shouted in unison before hugging the blonde. "How are you alive? You died 10 years ago," Ace questioned. "You can't say that. Especially after what happened after Marineford 2 months ago." Sabo nearly scolded, causing the group hug to stop. 2 months? That was a week ago. Luffy stated. "It feels like it was yesterday," Ace muttered. 2 months. From what I've heard, Lu woke up a week after the war and went on a bit of a rampage while screaming for Ace. He disappeared in the forest and Jinbei found him as a 7-year-old along with a 10-year-old Ace and 10-year-old copy of me. For nearly 2 months, you two, and a ghost trying to be me, have been jumping around from Trafalgar Law to the Straw Hat Pirates to finally end up on the Moby. You really don't remember any of it? Sabo explained. The last thing I remember is Marineford, Ace stated. I remember waking up in the middle of a clearing in the forest on Amazon Lily and hearing Ace and Sabo saying if I wished for them to come back they would. After that it's all blank, Luffy informed. Well now we know how it happened, Sabo muttered to himself. Happy to see you two are awake, Yoi, Marco said as he walked in the door with a small smile. Ah, Marco was worried, you are such a mother hen, Ace teased before laughing. Of course I was worried, Yoi. You're supposedly dead and then all of a sudden in the middle of the night you show up as a 10-year-old. Everyone's been worried. Marco shouted in annoyance before sighing. Ace, 3 voices shouted before said commander was tackled yet again. You're back to normal. Haruta shouted happily. We missed you, Vista yelled. Never do that again. Thatch cried. Wait, Thatch. Ace thought to himself in shock. Thatch, you're alive? Ace questioned. Of course I am. Do you really think that little stab would kill me? Thatch questioned proudly. That little stab still hurts like hell though, doesn't it, Yoi? Marco asked. Shut up, Thatch muttered in annoyance. Besides, it wouldn't be hurting if it wasn't for Garp. Ji-chan? He was here? Luffy asked, almost scared of the answer. Yeah, we ran into him a little while back, Haruta informed. What kind of damage did he do this time? Ace asked with a sigh. Other than throwing this at a wall, nothing, Vista informed, motioning to himself, Haruta, and Thatch. Why'd he throw you at a wall? Sabo asked curiously. He was trying to see if Ace, Luffy, and your copy were actually alive and safe, Yoi, Marco stated. Can we stop calling her my copy? Sabo asked, nearly begging. Who are you talking about? Ace questioned with slight annoyance. Your aunt. Everyone in the room, excluding Luffy and Ace, said. My aunt? I have an aunt? Ace asked confusedly. Yes and no, you have an aunt but she's kinda dead, has been for a long time, Thatch informed. Oh, Ace muttered, almost sadly. After a few moments of silence, the doctor walked into the room. I'll need to run a few basic tests. When that's done, you both can go. XXX. A half hour later, all hell broke loose. Ace and Luffy were let out, like promised, and immediately ran to the deck. When the brothers were on deck, everyone greeted them, either by shouting their names, saying, welcome back, or hugging titties saw them. Luffy was tackled to the ground. Each of the crew members were shouting in pure joy, even Sanji, Zoro, and Robin. When Sabo, Marco, Thatch, Vista, and Haruta made it to the deck, having chosen to walk, they couldn't help but laugh at the scene in front of them. After about an hour of the crews telling Ace and Luffy what happened and how worried they all were, the boys' stomachs growled loudly. How long have we been out? Ace asked, a slight blush of embarrassment on his freckled cheeks. About a week, Sabo said before his own stomach growled, causing a slight blush to cross his cheeks. 35 meals. Luffy shouted in shock. Stop counting 5 meals a day, Sanji shouted, kicking Luffy over the head. Calm down, Sanji, Thatch said with a sweat drop. You mind helping me make something for them to eat? TCH. Fine. Sanji sounded before following Thatch to the kitchen. An hour or so later, Sanji and Thatch came out announcing the food was ready. When everyone saw the food, they were all shocked. It wasn't just some soup or sandwiches. It was a full-on feast. Steak, chicken, soup, pasta, burgers, sandwiches, salads, everything they could think of. Within minutes, the feast had turned into a party. There was laughter, stories, music, drinking contests, and even a few fights, mostly between Ace and Luffy over food. After a few hours, Ace decided to go on deck. Ace stared at the sky and all the stars, his eyes eventually stopping on the star that Thatch told him about. Oyaji's star. After a few minutes, his eyes fell to another 2 stars that were right next to each other. One that seemed to be almost as big as Oyaji's and one that seemed to glow the brightest. He wasn't able to stop the small smile that slowly appeared on his lips. He couldn't help but think they were his parents. Hey, Thatch said with a soft smile as he walked up to Ace. Hey, Ace whispered, nearly fearing the stars would run away if he spoke too loudly. You talking to Oyaji too, or you just trying to escape the party? Thatch asked quietly. Neither really, just wondering why I was brought back. I mean, I'm the son of a demon. Why would I be able to come back? Ace thought aloud. Hey, don't say that about your dad. People may not like him because he was a pirate, let alone Pirate King, but that doesn't mean he's a bad guy, Thatch scolded. What makes you think you know him? Ace asked almost angrily as he turned to his friend. You don't remember, but we met him. He came down and said a few things that he wanted you and Luffy to remember. He told you a few things that just made you smile. It was nothing but whispers and he had his back to us so we don't know what he said. But in the end, he told you to live your dreams, do what you want even if it means going against Garp. Live for who you are, not who you're related to, and to stay with your loved ones, Thatch explained. Since you feel like talking, what did he say to Lou? Ace asked. Thatch smiled. He said, thanks for saving my son, Whatever that means, and that he's been watching over Luffy and Sabo for a while now, and that you couldn't have chosen better brothers. Said the kid's crew was strong and to keep it that way. Even complimented his hat. Did you know that Straw Hat originally belonged to him? Wow, Ace muttered. You believe me? Thatch questioned. Not at all. I just wanted to see how far you could take this. Ace said with a smirk. Oh, and congratulations. You're insane. Whatever. I don't care what you think. Your dad's a good guy, Ace. He's amazing. Never forget that. Thatch said as he turned to head back to the party. Almost as soon as he turned back to the stars, Ace felt something slowly glide down his cheek. He raised his hand to feel it and looked at his fingers to see they were wet. Believing the waves had just splashed a few drops onto his cheek, Ace ignored it until his eyes got blurry. Shortly after, his eyes widened and he smiled. He really is, isn't he? Ace whispered with a proud smile. What? Thatch asked curiously, having not heard, as he turned back to Ace. Roger, my dad, he really is great, isn't he? Ace muttered a little louder. Ace, do you remember? Thatch questioned. Yeah, only what he said to us though. By the way, Thatch, you are crazy. There's no way around it. Ace said with a chuckle at the end. Oh, shut up. I already know that. Thatch said with a large grin as he playfully punched Ace's arm. Also, you and everyone who helped do that to my room, get to fix it. Put everything exactly where it was before. Ace said with a grin after wiping the tears from his eyes. You're kidding me, Thatch exclaimed. Better hope at least one of you has a photographic memory. I'm not saying where anything was, but I will inspect it, Ace said as he started to head back to the party. What? Thatch shouted. I want it done tomorrow. Better go ask if they remember, Ace teased. Shit, Thatch yelped before running back into the party and searching for the ones who helped put together the room. Ace looked back to the sky with a soft smile and stared at the 3 stars he loved most. Edward Newgate, Portgas D. Rouge, and Gold D. Roger. His family. Thank you. For everything. Ace whispered before heading back into the party. XXX the next day, Marco had called the 3 brothers for a private conference. When Sabo had entered the room, he noticed he was the last one to arrive. He sat down at the last open chair next to Luffy and looked to Marco expectantly. Marco cleared his throat before speaking. Due to recent events, I've come up with a few thoughts and ideas, Yoi. As you've either remembered or been told, Roger suggested loved ones stay together. With this, I would not like to separate the 3 of you, Yoi. I have a few proposals. First of all, Ace. Now that I am the captain, there's no 1st Division commander or first mate. I'd like you to take up that position if you will, Yoi. Marco informed. So I'm getting a promotion? Ace asked before laughing. Thatch'll love that. Why do you say that? Sabo asked. I told Thatch and the others to fix my room. They're taking all the stuff from when we were kids out and putting all my old stuff back in. Exactly where it was before as well. Ace said with an evil chuckle at the end. Do you accept the offer or not, Yoi? Marco asked. I do. Just give me some time to move my stuff, Ace said with a smirk. You're gonna make them move it all to the 2nd Division commander's room and then to the 1st Division commander's room, aren't you? Sabo asked skeptically. Oh yeah. Ace stated as he leaned back in his chair and put his hands behind his head. Marco sighed. Next, Sabo. I understand you are a revolutionary, but I would like you to join our crew, Yoi. You're already considered part of the family, this would make it more so. If you would join us, I would also like to request you become the 2nd Division commander. Of course I would also understand if you chose to go back to the revolutionaries instead, Yoi. So, either be with the people who raised me for the past 10 years of my life or be on the same ship as my brother, Sabo said thoughtfully before smirking. I promised Roger I'd teach him a sense of danger. He also needs someone smart. That he'll listen to. Sabo reminded, adding in the last part before Marco could say anything. Yeah. I'll join. What? I wanted you on my crew though, Luffy whined. Now Luffy. Marco said, cutting off Sabo before he could speak this time. I'd like for the Whitebeard Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates to have an alliance, Yoi. Well, it's a little more than an alliance. I'd like for the Straw Hat Pirates to practically become the 17th Division, Yoi. You would still be captain, still have your flag, ship, and crew. But you would be part of our fleet. You would also be able to go on your own adventures still, Yoi. What would be the difference? It seems kinda like you're saying you want my crew but you don't at the same time, Luffy asked. He's actually paying both thought in unison as they stared at their younger brother in shock. I presume you are correct. Everything would remain the same, expect your crew would be part of the family and, only if fully necessary, your crew would help us, Yoi. If one of the islands we are protecting is being attacked and you are closer than we are, we would call on you for your help. Other than that, you would practically be your own crew still, Yoi, Marco explained. That's it? We help protect one of your islands if needed? Luffy questioned. Would you have any ideas of your own, Yoi? Marco asked. Maybe, if needed, you can put a few of your crew onto our ship from time to time. If you don't have enough room and need time to make adjustments to the ship, then we could take a few people for a short time. I'm sure even Frankie would like to help upgrade the ship. My crew would be happy to help you. Zoro with training. Nami with navigation. Usopp with marksmanship. Sanji with cooking. Chopper with healing any wounded. Robin with intelligence. Frankie with ship upgrades. Brook with swordsmanship or music. My crew is very well diverse. I'm sure we could help in any way. Luffy suggested. Ace and Sabo looked at each other with shocked expressions. Ace practically asking Sabo if it was actually Luffy. Did you know he was that smart? Sabo mouthed to Ace. Not a clue. Ace mouthed, slowly shaking his head, no. Marco looked down and hummed in thought before looking back to Luffy. I'll consider it, Yoi. But with this suggestion, am I correct to presume you accept my proposal? Of course. Luffy said with a smile and nod, but there's one thing I'm concerned about. And that would be, Yoi. Marco pressed. If I find One Piece, do I have to give it to you or do I get to become Pirate King? Luffy asked. On our crew, if you find it's yours. If you were to find the One Piece, then you have become Pirate King and we will assist you in any way, Yoi. Marco stated. Good to know. Luffy said simply. Alright. All of you are dismissed, Yoi. I suggest you get Thatch and the others to move your belongings to your correct room, Ace. Marco suggested. Ace snapped out of his shock upon hearing his name and nodded when he guessed it was something about Thatch and his room. When remembering the word, dismissed, was used, Ace stood and started to leave the room, shortly followed by the room's other 3 inhabitants. Quietly, Ace headed to the 2nd Division Commander's room and saw the door was open. Ace looked in and saw a few people, including Thatch, running around trying to put things in the correct place. Without anyone noticing, Ace took a chair out of the room and put it in the hall at the right angle so that he could watch them but they couldn't see him. He watched as they ran around and tripped a few times, finding it hard not to laugh. When the room was finished being remade, Thatch walked out of the room to look for Ace only to nearly have a heart attack when the man was sitting next to the door with a smirk. How long have you been there? Long enough to see you fall on your face 3 times and panic about your hair once, Ace stated. God damn it, how we not notice you? Thatch questioned. I sat so that I can see you but not the other way around, Ace said bluntly. Of course. Just check and see if it's right already, Thatch nearly growled. With an innocent smile, Ace stood from the chair and looked around the room. A few spots he looked closely at as if trying to find something wrong. In the end, Ace had to congratulate them. Along with calling them freaks for getting it so perfectly. Well done. Ace said with an innocence in his voice that nearly made Thatch run for cover. But it's all in the wrong room. What? Thatch and the others questioned in unison. Haven't you heard? I've been promoted. Move it all to the 1st Division Commander's room. Oh, and make sure it looks exactly like this. Ace said happily before leaving the room. Wait, when did that happen? Thatch shouted down the hall at Ace. 20 minutes ago. I came to tell you but you looked like you were having so much fun that I just had to let you finish, Ace said before laughing at Thatch's growl and walking back on deck. XXX Sabo didn't really know what to do. He didn't have much and what little he had was back at Revolutionary HQ. He didn't really want to go back just to get his stuff and then come back. That'd take too long. He thought about it for a few minutes and realized, it was nothing but clothes and his brother's old wanted posters. He could tell their bounties would raise later on so he didn't have to worry about that. Then it came to his clothes. They were still docked so it was possible to buy some new outfits. He didn't care much for his clothing. He had one outfit in particular that he liked and he was already wearing it. I guess I get to go shopping. Sabo muttered to himself as he walked to the railing. XXX Luffy had gone straight to the Thousand Sunny to explain the situation to his crew. When he saw everyone was there, he smiled at how much easier it was now that he didn't have to hunt down everyone. He quickly explained the alliance he and Marco had agreed on and even Ace's promotion along with Sabo's joining. When he was finished explaining, Luffy looked over the shocked faces of his crew. What? Since when were you smart? Nami questioned loudly and suddenly. How did you come up with that idea? Usopp asked, still shocked. Dunno. He said it would be more than an alliance and what he said seemed like just a plain alliance. Maybe less. That's just what came to mind, Luffy said with a shrug. The crew sighed, except Robin who giggled. Their captain was the same old idiot they all chose to follow. Something's never change, they all thought in unison. With that said, Luffy ran back up to the deck and back to the Moby. XXX Marco watched as the crew walked around and did their daily routine. Soon after, he noticed the three brothers on deck. From what he could tell, Sabo was about to jump off the ship to go into the town while Ace and Luffy were just bored. He watched as the three jumped over the railings and landed on the white sand beach below them before running off towards the town. He'd hold off the announcement until they made it back to the ship. XXX an hour later, the three brothers were running back to the Moby with a few shopkeepers and chefs chasing them. They quickly jumped onto the large whale-shaped ship and hid behind the railing. When they heard the angry people walk away, they all let loose their laughter. They couldn't help but laugh at the sense of déjà vu the act had been. It had been 10 years since they had done a dine and dash together and it couldn't have gone better. They had bought Sabo his clothes and a few outfits for Ace and Luffy as well. They had passed a tuxedo shop when their stomachs had growled. The three had gotten the same idea and had ran into the shop immediately. They came out of the store with the suits on and started walking as if they truly were nobility. They had walked to a large and expensive-looking restaurant, asked for the VIP room, and started ordering whatever they thought sounded good. Just before they were full, the three had broken the window and jumped out of it and onto the street. Soon enough they were being chased by the owner of the restaurant, some of the chefs, the waiters and waitresses, and a few of the shop owners near the place. When the boys had stopped laughing, they noticed they were being stared at by curious eyes. They looked at their clothes and realized they were still dressed as noblemen. Each of them were wearing a black, or dark blue in Sabo's case, tuxedo along with a small addition. Ace had gotten a fake mustache and had been wearing that along with having his hair pulled back. Sabo had his black top hat on but the goggles were in one of the bags. Luffy had found a pair of fake glasses and was wearing those along with having his hair slicked back, his hat in one of the bags. He wasn't a good look at each other. The brothers started laughing again. The hell? Vista questioned as he walked up to the trio. We just had the best day of our lives, the trio shouted in unison. And it's about to get better, Yoi, Marco said from a few feet away from the boys. What do you mean? Ace asked curiously. Vista. Would you and a few others please gather the crew together, Yoi? I have a very important announcement to make, Marco said with a small smile. Understood, Vista said before going off to gather the crew. You think we have enough time to get changed? Sabo asked as he stood and dusted himself off. Hurry. Once one person finds out, it takes about 10 minutes to spread throughout the ship, Yoi, Marco stated. With that, the trio were running to their respective rooms, or ship, with their bags. XXX. Just as Marco had said, the entire Whitebeard crew had gathered on the deck in less than 10 minutes. It had taken 6 minutes for the crews to gather and were now awaiting the trio of brothers. Oi, Marco. What's with the crowd? Ace called playfully from within the crowd. Seriously, this is way too many people, Sabo shouted out from another part of the crowd. Maybe you will need my ship after all, Luffy yelled playfully from a completely different part of the crowd. Will you three idiots get up here already, Yoi? Marco yelled. Within seconds, the brothers were standing next to the blonde captain. Marco quickly looked over their outfits and had to say they looked well dressed yet also casual. Perfect for the occasion. Ace was wearing his usual black shorts, black combat boots, cyan pouch on his left hip, orange elbow guard, his two leather belts with the rectangular belt buckle with the red A in the center. and his usual orange cowboy hat along with the red and white striped bracelet and eternal pose on his left wrist and red bead necklace around his neck. Marco honestly didn't expect him to dress any differently. Different usually meant wearing a shirt, and Ace wouldn't allow that on such a nice day. Sabo, however, was wearing long white dress pants, a black, long-sleeved shirt with a white belt around his waist and a white cravat along with a very dark blue tailcoat and his usual top hat with blue goggles. The only thing that made him lose that perfect noble look was the fact that he was wearing black combat boots, he had a long pole in his hand, and had a burn scar running over his left eye. All in all, he looked pretty good. Luffy had a slightly different outfit. He wore an open, long-sleeved, red cardigan and a yellow sash wrapped around his waist along with his usual denim shorts, sandals, and trademark straw hat. The X-shaped scar on his chest standing out almost as much as his trademark grin. New and yet old. Simple change but nice. Marco turned back to the crowd and grinned. As you all know, we had considered Ace's brothers as our own family for the past few weeks, yoi. Even months if you count the countless times he told us of his idiotic little brother and genius brother. But today marks it official, yoi. As of today, Ace will be the 1st Division Commander, along with Sabo being our 2nd Division Commander. And since too much is never enough, the Straw Hat Pirates have become our 17th Division, yoi. When Marco stopped speaking, the 3 brothers looked at each other before grinning. They all looked out to the crowd in front of them and each raised a fist to the sky. To family, Fen.